So there I was, dead. That's how my story starts, dead and then a beep. Let me back up. My name is Jiang Anan, and until recently, I was a fish. A big one. Grew up at the bottom of the sea, listening to my mom tell fairy tales, minding my own pond, living the dream. Then I died. And then a cold robot voice booted up inside my skull like a vending machine clearing its throat. Soul extraction complete. Welcome to salvation. You are now inside the third instance of this book. Population, mostly doomed. The voice had a job for me. Come back to life, it said, by fixing a story. There's a book called Salvation. In it, a princess and a warrior fall in love, and there's an evil dragon who ruins everything. My mom told me 1,000 versions of this. The dragon blocks the path, the hero wins, everybody kisses. Classic. So I cracked my knuckles, or whatever fish do. Point me at the dragon. The dragon's name is Wu Jinyang, second male lead, biggest hidden villain in the book. Ruthless, arrogant, unscrupulous, the whole starter pack. He's got a one-sided crush on the female lead and a habit of murdering people to keep her single. And the system informed me, in the flattest voice imaginable, that in the end, this guy snaps and kills both the prince and the princess. I want you to understand what that did to a fish raised on bedtime stories. The dragon kills the princess? And the warrior? My whole worldview just took a torpedo. Everything my mom read me was a lie. So the mission was simple. Stop Wu Jinyang from killing the leads. Easy. I just defeat the evil dragon like the warrior does. Hero stuff. Then the system paused. The kind of pause a GPS makes right before it tells you you've driven into a lake. You don't need to defeat him, it said. Your task is to win him over. If he falls in love with you, the leads live. I said, are you sure? It said, this is the only way. I said, okay then. And that right there is the entire plot of my life. I have to make the meanest man in the book fall in love with me, or my soul gets deleted forever. No pressure, no revival. My body's already a corpse. Fail, and I'm gone for good. The system also mentioned, very casually, that 196 people tried this mission before me. All 196 failed. Cool. Love those odds. Oh, and the funniest part. It turns out the villain of this book is technically me. Well, my host body. Jiang Anan, orphan from Zone E, dragged back to rich society a month ago, immediately fell for the male lead and spent every day tripping the female lead and being a menace. So I'm not the warrior in this story. I'm the annoying gremlin the warrior wants gone. Fantastic. 10 out of 10 protagonist experience. Now where did I wake up? A forest. And through the bushes, an altar. Circle of people in black robes holding candles, heads bowed, real cult vibes. In the middle, a villager on his knees crying, please don't kill me. And standing over him, one guy who was clearly the main character of the creepy. Black robe, bone-white hand, a silver dragon ring coiled around a blue gem. Everybody else in the circle was staring at him, not the sacrifice. Obviously the dragon. And I have to be honest with you, my first real thought, looking at the man I was destined to seduce or die trying was, wow, he is more handsome than any fish in the sea. Which, for me, is basically a marriage proposal. Then he took a fancy carved knife, walked to the center of the altar, and stabbed the villager straight down through the chest. Blood everywhere. The chanting stopped dead. The blood ran into the grooves of the altar. The whole thing burst into red flame, and Wu Jinyang just stood inside the fire like it was a warm bath. The priest, kneeling nearby, wept with joy and called him Lord Envoy. Welcome, my god. So that's my target, a guy who gets called a living god by a murder cult, and I've got to make him my boyfriend. My mom did not prepare me for this specific fairy tale. While I was processing all this, someone groaned in the leaves behind me. A boy. Chen Haoran. Rich kid, pretty face, permanently furious. Turns out he's technically my fiancé in this world, some arranged family thing nobody's supposed to know, and he hates it because he's obsessed with the female lead, Su Ruokshi. His whole personality is simping for a girl who won't look at him. We're going to be spending a lot of time together, lucky me. He immediately started yelling at me. Help me up, you idiot! You said you saw Wu Jinyang! You made me fall off a ledge! You pretend to be innocent, but you're the sneaky one! On and on. He poked me in the forehead to punctuate it. I filed that away. Poking foreheads, I decided, must be how humans say hello. He kept demanding to know where Wu Jinyang was. I told him, behind you. He said, stop messing with me. I said, again, patiently, behind you. He turned around, and there was the whole murder cult, plus the dragon himself, still wiping blood off his fingers one at a time like a man doing his skincare. Chen Haoran nearly fainted. I thought that was rude, so I introduced myself properly. Hello, my name is Jiang Anan. Wu Jinyang looked at me like I was a stain. Then he swept his ring over my head, checking for something, and the blue gems stayed dead. No energy. And his whole face curdled into contempt. Genetic mutant, he said. No psychic power, non-psychic. Then, like it was the worst word he owned, defective product. I didn't know what that meant, so I leaned over to Chen Haoran and whispered, "What's a defective product?" He hissed, "It means you're trash. He's insulting you, you moron." Oh, insulting me. Got it. So I walked up to the living god of the murder cult and pointed my finger right at his forehead. Because that, as I just learned, is how you say hi. And I told him, with genuine concern, "Is something wrong with you? You should see a doctor. My mom says when your head's broken, that's the serious one. The other parts you can live without, but that one, sigh, that's a shame." Everybody stopped breathing. Shen Haoran's soul left his body, and Wu Jinyang smiled the kind of smile a knife makes and said, "Kill them. Now." Which is when I threw a flashbang. Where did a dead fish get a flashbang, you ask? Look, when I lived in the sea, humans up on the surface were always fighting, and stuff fell down. Sometimes good stuff. My mom taught me the flashy one is called a flashbang, and I always thought that was a fun name. So I kept a couple. Point is, blinding white light, everybody screaming, and I grabbed Chen Haoran by the collar and ran. Turns out I'm very fast and never get tired, and Chen Haoran is a rich boy whose cardio peaked at complaining. He gave out in about a minute, and Wu Jinyang, back at the altar, was not thrilled that a defective product had just made him blink. He cracked his thumb against that dragon ring and sent his whole cult plus a Doberman named Bandit into the woods to hunt us down. Now the forest. This is where things got interesting, because the forest was full of things, and I like things. First, we found a headless old man in the bushes. I told Chen Haoran, "Oh dear, this old man doesn't have a head." He started screaming, so I covered his mouth, because screaming attracts the stuff that takes the heads. Then a heat blew past and something dropped from the tree over him, and I caught it. Just a little snake. I said hello and asked its name. It didn't have one. It left. Rude, but fine. Then a shadow reached for me out of the trees, so I grabbed it and reeled it in like a tug of war, and out came the ugliest thing I've ever seen. And I've seen fish with see-through skulls. No skin, just brown muscle and slime, arms twice too long, teeth everywhere, eyes like two black grapes with no white at all. It tried to bite my head off, so I held its jaw shut and gave it a talking to. I told it its teeth were scary, and it should really stop reaching out and grabbing people on the road. That was rude, and it almost tripped me earlier. It got mad and glared. I slapped it. "Glaring won't fix anything," I said. Then I let it go and told it to go home and stop following me. It lunged anyway. And then a wall of white flame shot up out of the ground between us, and the monster stared at that fire for a second and fled up a tree. I did not mention the flame part to Chen Haoran. Some things you don't say out loud. We followed a light out of the woods, and it turned out to be the princess and the warrior themselves. Su Ruoxi, the female lead, S-rank psychic, cold as a freezer, and the actual captain of our little team. And Lin Zian, the male lead, gentle, rich heir, leader of a faction called White Dove. The system pinged their names in my head like a menu. These are the two I'm supposed to keep alive. Here's the setup, since you're going to need it. Everybody in this world is a genetic mutant. The lucky ones have psychic power. The unlucky ones, like my host body, have none, and get called defective, and get shipped off to Zone E to rot. And the biggest bully on the continent is an organization called Blue Dragon, who run a lovely little initiative called the Gene Cleansing Project, which is exactly as friendly as it sounds. They want to wipe out everyone without powers. And Wu Jinyang is their one and only leader. So the man I have to romance runs the Genocide Club, and I'm the exact kind of person he wants erased. Great match. Mom would be so proud. Chen Haoran tried to explain all this to me, and I nodded along and understood roughly none of it. And when he warned me they could make me die a horrible death, I told him not to worry. I didn't have a whole corpse anyway. He went quiet after that. Also, the Doberman adopted me. Bandit. Big, scary hunting dog, supposed to be Wu Jinyang's, and he just started following me around and sniffing me and refusing to leave. I named him a good boy immediately. This will become a theme. Everything Wu Jinyang owns keeps defecting to me. Back at the village gate, the whole group crossed paths with Wu Jinyang again, all smiles now, playing nice with Captain Ye. And as I walked by, he grabbed my arm, leaned down with that knife smile, and told me, "You got lucky tonight. Just you wait." I genuinely did not understand the assignment. "Wait for what?" I asked. "Do you need something from me?" He called me an idiot for playing dumb. So I reminded him of the ledger. You insulted me, I pointed at your head. We're even. But then you also sent your whole cult to chase me through the woods. So? And I stepped, gently, firmly, directly onto his foot. I'm very generous, I told him. Now we're even. And I smiled and walked off. Behind me, I'm told, the living god of the murder cult stood frozen with his mouth open, while his flunky pretended very hard to be looking at something else. And Wu Jinyang, quietly, told that flunky to find an opportunity to deal with me. First of many times he'd order my death. Spoiler, the body count on that order stays at 0 the whole book. That night, alone, I hit my first real wall. Stairs. You have to understand, this body was new. Legs were new. In the sea I had, not these. So I stood at the bottom of the staircase in the dark, lifted my left foot, then my right, then forgot which one I'd started with, and went down hard on both knees. Bang. Muttering to myself the whole time. First time being a human, still getting used to it. Which are exactly the words you don't want the rich boy downstairs to overhear. Chen Haoran heard the banging, crept up, and caught me mid-collapse. He decided I was pranking him, pretending to be a ghost to scare him for revenge. I let him think that. Much easier than explaining that walking is genuinely a skill I do not have yet. So I watched how he climbed the stairs, memorized the footwork like a boss fight pattern, stood up, and walked past him perfectly. He stared at my medical miracle and screamed my name. I ran up without looking back. You learn fast when your soul's on the line. Next morning, the grown-ups had a war meeting. Xu Ruoxi and Lin Zian sat around a map, arguing about the village. And here's the deal with this place. It's a bowl surrounded by mountains, and once you walk in, you never walk out. The villagers came here as exiles and got trapped. Then the church showed up out of nowhere, and after they arrived, the forest caught fire, a fire that never goes out, and monsters started crawling out of it. But the monsters can't get past the village wall because the church's blessing keeps them out. So the villagers hate the church and blame them for the fire, and the church says no, the villagers angered the gods. 2 stories, nobody agrees, real cozy neighborhood. And then Wu Jinyang strolled in, uninvited, to offer a team-up. Very generous of the man leading the enemy faction. He laid it out. Our missions are opposite in the end. White Dove protects the villagers, Blue Dragon helps the church. But before all that, both sides need the same thing first. Put out the hellfire. So, temporary truce. Work together, kill the fire, stab each other later. He guessed every one of our secret objectives before we said a word, then smiled about it. Punchable, honestly. He was mid-sentence being all mysterious when I made my grand entrance. Which is to say I came down the stairs, and I want to be clear, I had not mastered stairs. I got about 3 steps in, lost the footwork pattern, and tumbled the rest of the way down like a headless log, chin bouncing off every step, mouth clamped shut the entire time so I wouldn't make a sound. Silent. Dignified. A gourd rolling downhill. The whole room stared. Su Ruoxi rushed over, going, "What is wrong with you? You fell down the stairs!" And I hopped up, brushed myself off, and told her cheerfully, "It's fine, I'm just not used to this leg yet." Then I squeezed through everybody, brushed my hair against the murder god's sleeve on purpose, leaned on the map table right in front of him and said, "Please, continue." He stared at my hair for a second, and continued. So we all trooped out to the forest together to test this blessing thing, one big, awkward field trip. 2 rival factions and a fish. The village was covered in what looked like snow but was actually ash, whole forest burning somewhere, and raining gray powder on the rooftops. I caught some. Ate a little. You'd have done the same. Bandit the Doberman was still glued to me, so I walked him like he was mine, and then I handed the leash straight back to Wu Jinyang with a big, teary smile. "Your little dog." He yanked his hand back like I was contagious and told me to stay away from him. My face fell. I went and stood by Su Ruoxi instead. And this is the part I'll say straight, no jokes. Lin Zian saw me looking sad and offered me a handful of candy. And the second one melted in my mouth. The whole ocean came back. Because I tasted this exactly once, as a little fish, when a jar washed down to the seabed and I bit it open, and something sweet spilled into my mouth. And my mom said, "That's called sweet." I spent years after that swimming every coastline looking for another jar. Never found one. And here was a boy just handing me a whole fistful like it was nothing. I put them in my pocket one at a time, careful as treasure. Lin Zian watched me do it and got quiet, thinking the orphanage never gave me candy. Close enough. Then I ate a butterfly. I want to be upfront about this. Lin Zian was mid-sentence going, "Aw, look at her. She's like a little kid chasing butterflies, and I caught one, licked my lips, and put it in my mouth. Su Ruoxi had to sprint over and pry my jaw open and fish it back out. The butterfly left the scene at a speed it had never achieved in its life. "Don't eat butterflies," they told me. Noted. Terrible policy, but noted. To make it up to everyone, I wove 2 flower crowns, put one on my own head, offered the other to Wu Jinyang, who stepped back like I was holding a snake. So I hung it on Bandit instead, his dog, wearing my flowers. Wu Jinyang's eye did a little twitch, and later he made his flunky rip it off and throw it away, and the dog gave the flowers one sad look and dropped his head. Everything that man owns keeps trying to leave him. I'm just saying. The flunky's name is Marcus, by the way, and Marcus became my best friend, which infuriated his boss no end. We got stuck walking through the endless hellfire together for ages, so naturally I told him fairy tales. My mom's classics. The ugly duckling who sells matches. Tragic, freezes to death, Marcus nearly cried. Then a happy one, about a little mermaid who took a poisoned apple from a jealous queen and slept in a tower until some peas grew out of her blanket and woke her up. I call it The Princess and the Pea. Marcus, choking up, informed me that was actually Sleeping Beauty and he'd seen it hundreds of times, so clearly my sea education had holes. I apologized for being uneducated. Wu Jinyang, walking ahead of us, kept mysteriously stumbling for no reason at all. Then I got hungry, which for me is a genuine emergency, and I sighed. And sighed. And sighed 108 times until Wu Jinyang finally snapped and asked what I wanted. "I'm starving," I told him. "Haven't eaten in ages. Thousands of years, roughly." He sighed too and tossed me a metal ration box. So I bit it. The corner, then more, chewing thoughtfully, wondering why modern humans live on iron. He heard the crunching, whipped around in horror, snatched the box out of my teeth, and discovered the food was the liquid inside, which you inject, not the can, which you do not. Rich people food is confusing. And when Su Ruoxi mentioned that normal people eat 3 meals a day, I nearly wept. 3? I'd starve. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, sure. But where's the morning tea, the afternoon tea, the midnight snack, the dessert after every meal, the snack before every meal? All gone. Cruel world. Marcus patted my shoulder and told me proudly that I may be bad at everything else, but I can out-eat anyone he's ever met, even him. I told him modestly that he was very talented too. We got along great. His boss hated it. Somewhere in there we met the monsters properly. A big, charred humanoid rose out of the fire, split its own burnt skin, and out came the skinless muscle thing with the spiked wings and the grape eyes. Then a dozen more in the trees. Everybody opened fire. Bullets worked, sort of, except the things healed instantly, and when Lin Zian snapped a whole tree down onto one and killed it, it just melted into the dirt, and a fresh copy climbed out of the flames. Immortal. Lovely. 2 of them lunged at Su Ruoxi from the side, too fast for anyone. And Wu Jinyang, who'd been standing at the back watching us struggle with the boredom of a man waiting for a bus, sighed, lifted one finger, and both monsters fell in half. No motion, just a look and a finger. Everyone else here is S-rank and shooting for their lives, and this man swats horrors like flies while checking his ring. That's when it clicked for the room. He's not on their level. He's not on anyone's level. And I nodded along because obviously the evil dragon is stronger than the prince and the princess. That's what makes it a good story. Su Ruoxi finally pulled out the blessing, that little warm dot of light, and the second it glowed, the monsters shrieked and drained backward into the trees like a tide going out. So the church wasn't lying about that part, at least. The blessing really does hold them off. Then we found the thing at the center, a huge dead tree with no leaves, bark full of blood-red veins, branches heavy with blood-red flowers, petals drifting down into the fire. Beautiful, in a "your organs are about to be harvested" way. Su Ruoxi drifted toward it, and suddenly her psychic power started draining out of her like a pulled plug. Her shield shattered, her clothes caught white fire. Lin Zian yanked her back and shielded her and Chen Haoran both, screaming at everyone to run. And here's the thing nobody caught but Wu Jinyang. Once Su Ruoxi went down, my borrowed shield went with her. I had 0 protection, and the white flames, which were happily eating everyone else alive, curled away from me. Politely. Carefully. Like they were scared of hurting me. I just lifted my skirt and strolled out of the fire behind the others, minding my business. But Wu Jinyang stopped, tilted his head, watched the fire tiptoe around the defective non-psychic girl, and filed it away in that cold little vault of his. What exactly, he wondered, is going on with Jiang Anan? Good question, buddy. Keep wondering. Back in the village, licking their wounds, Wu Jinyang and Marcus had a quiet talk that told me everything about what Blue Dragon actually wanted here. That blood tree, that fire, the thing draining psychic power. Wu Jinyang called it by its real name, the Fire Seed, spark of all psychic power, the source, and he'd crossed how many little worlds hunting for the first one. This was it, the prize. The team-up, the truce, the whole helpful neighbor act, none of it was about saving villagers. He came for the seed. And the fact that it kept regrowing monsters and grass in a way no ancient document described, that bothered him. Because Wu Jinyang likes to already know everything, and this place kept handing him a question he couldn't answer. He decided he'd go collect the seed himself. And, oh right, he told Marcus, that non-psychic girl, still want me to slit her throat? And Marcus, who by now genuinely liked me, stalled and made excuses, and Wu Jinyang's voice went to absolute zero and reminded him, the day a Blue Dragon member starts liking one of the garbage people is the day he stops being a Blue Dragon member. Keep an eye on her. Tell me the second she does anything strange. Marcus's teeth were chattering by the end of it. Later, he muttered to the dog that the young master had gotten really scary these past few years. Bandit looked up at him and said nothing, because he's a dog, but you could tell he agreed. Suruoxi sent me to go interview the village, mostly to keep me busy and out of the fire. Fine by me. I like meeting people, and things, and snacks. First I met Clara. Braided hair, kind smile, the Pope's own daughter, though I didn't know that yet. She was collecting eggs and she boiled a few for me and poured warm goat milk, and I sipped it exactly like she did and nearly melted into the chair. She told me the village legend. This land used to be barren, nothing grew, people starved, until the old village chief found fertile soil and water at the bottom of a cliff and brought life back. Hero of the whole village. Then her boyfriend Owen wandered in, kissed her hello like I wasn't standing right there, and cheerfully explained that Clara's dad, the Pope, leads the church, that the monsters used to sneak into the village wearing the faces of dead relatives to lure people out and kill them, and that the church burned them and put up the blessing to protect everyone. The church meant well, Owen said. The villagers just blamed them anyway. I thanked Clara with a handful of my candy, which is the highest honor I give, and she slipped 2 boiled eggs into my bag and patted my head and told me to eat them before they got cold. People kept doing that, patting my head, feeding me. I did not hate it. Then I went looking for the church itself and found a big stone building with a metal emblem on top shaped almost like a whale, except for the 2 huge black eyes staring down at the whole village. I sat in a corner to eat Clara's eggs, cracked one open, tried the yolk, made a face, spat it out, and ate the shell instead, wrapped in a leaf like a little dumpling. The yolk's the bad part. The shells got crunch. Bandit showed up, ate the yolks I rejected, and the 2 of us split eggs by preference. Him the inside, me the outside. A perfect system. Then Wu Jinyang arrived, and I stuffed a leaf-wrapped eggshell into his hand and told him to try it. It's delicious. My new big sister gave it to me. He held the eggshell behind his back and said nothing, which I took as a yes. Then the Pope himself found us, old and white-bearded and kind, and he called Wu Jinyang Lord Envoy again and asked if I was the Great One's friend and invited me into the church. And I forgot all about Wu Jinyang and ran to the nice grandpa, because church tour, why not? Inside were murals, and the murals told the real story, though nobody in that room understood it yet except maybe me. The church didn't come from here. They came from a drowning island by the sea, storms and starvation, until a god came up out of the deep to save them. And there on the wall was their god, a fish, as big as a whale, body deep ocean blue, a pair of glowing eyes. Its left eye reverses the past, the Pope said. Its right eye foretells the future. It makes all things grow and die. It blesses and it curses. Its name is Kairos. I stared at that painted fish for a long, long time, longer than I let on, because I know a thing or two about being a very large fish with glowing eyes who lives at the bottom of the sea. But I just tilted my head and let the grandpa keep talking. The Pope told the rest. The church came here spreading their faith, felt an evil power in this place, walked in, and got trapped like everyone else. Then hellfire lit, the monsters dropped their human disguises, and the church put up the blessing to hold the village together. Their conscience is clear, he said. If the fire were their fault, why would the gods still let them use divine power to protect everyone? Ignorant people just blame others for their own sins, which, funny enough, is word for word what Wu Jinyang had been whispering in my ear all day. Go find out what shameful thing the villagers did. Their sins lit the fire. The church are the real victims. He kept nudging me toward that conclusion, gentle as a current, hoping the dumb little fish would swallow it. and I let him think I had. But I'd already noticed the church only pretends to help. They came to recruit followers first, and only threw up the blessing to save their own skin. I said as much out loud, mild as milk, and watched his face freeze for a second before he smiled and moved the goalposts. Even if they had other motives, they still protect the village, that's a fact. Sure, I agreed. Sure it is. Then, as the sun went down, he tried his real move. He turned those questions around on me, soft as dusk. How do you think those monsters appeared? Who made them? The fire tore off their disguise and made them monsters, but is that really their true form? He wasn't asking me, he was steering me, planting a story in the empty little head he thought I had. And for just a second I stopped playing dumb. I looked at him, and I've been told my eyes went flat and deep and quiet, like still water with something enormous underneath. He frowned. He couldn't read it. Then Marcus called him away, and I snapped right back to bouncy and bright and waved goodbye. See you tomorrow, Wu Jinyang. He watched me skip off into the dark, one small, non-psychic girl who somehow makes fire flinch and villains stumble. He still thought I was the easiest mark in the room. Ask me how long that lasts. Here's the thing about Wu Jinyang. The man notices everything, and he weaponizes flowers. Walking back to his base, Marcus grumbled about the ugly black flowers lining the church road. Who plants a whole street of black dahlias? It's bad luck. And Wu Jinyang, who'd been ignoring me all day when I asked the exact same question, suddenly stopped dead, plucked one, rolled the stem between two fingers like it owed him money. Marcus, he said, do you know what a black dahlia means? Marcus didn't. Betrayal, Wu Jinyang said. Then, soft and cold, what kind of person plants a whole road of betrayal? Go find out who put these here, and I want you to remember that because that flower is doing more foreshadowing than anyone in this story realizes. Meanwhile, I reported my church findings to the team, and it did not match what the villagers had told them at all. Chen Haoran refused to believe a word, because I'd heard it all from the Pope's daughter, the Pope, and Wu Jinyang, and in his opinion that's 3 liars in a trench coat. Fair. But then he made the mistake of asking whether we should protect the villagers, even if they turned out to be bad people. And Lin Zian said quietly, our mission is to protect them, good or evil. Chen Haoran lost it. I can't protect a monster, he said. And Shu Ruoshi just shook her head at him like he was very young. Then everyone turned to me. What do you think, Jiang Anan? And I told them the truth. Good and evil are the same to me. Doesn't matter who I protect. Chen Haoran recoiled like I'd slapped him. But my mom taught me this. Nothing in the world is all good or all evil. Both have their way of living. As long as nobody tips the balance and breaks the natural order, you leave it alone. He called me cold-hearted and stormed off. And you should sit with that answer, because a girl who thinks good and evil are the same thing, who talks about the natural order like a park ranger, is not talking like an orphan from the slums. She's talking like something a lot older than all of them. Anyway, then I got hungry, which for me is a 5-alarm event. I circled the living room 99 times like a starving ghost until a White Dove member took pity and pointed me at the kitchen, where a kind girl handed me the whole pot of steamed buns. I couldn't hold them all, so I tied my skirt into a pouch around my neck and had her load me up like a delivery truck. First bun of my life. Officially the second best food in the world, right behind sugar. My legs swung off the fence with joy. Then a filthy hand grabbed my ankle. An old man crawled out of the dark corner, matted hair, black with grime, eyeing my buns like a wolf. So I gave him one. Then 2. He wolfed them down, and then, in a cracked voice, he told me a story. The village chief. Barren land, everyone starving, until the young hero searched everywhere for water and soil, fell off a cliff, and by pure luck found the source of life and saved everyone. Hero of the whole village. Except then his story broke down into a loop. Treasure. He used his treasure to save them. Kill him. Give me the treasure. I want the treasure. Over and over, quieter and quieter, until he crawled away into the dark. I didn't say anything. I just watched him go, and I put my last bun carefully in my bag, and I climbed the stairs on a full stomach, thinking about a hero who traded a treasure to feed a dying village. Next morning, I fell down the stairs again, exact same way, full clatter, 0 injuries, and Lin Zian winced at the noise and said, kids are so resilient. Su Ruoshi took a sip of water and told him I was 18. He rubbed his forehead. That's true. Nobody can believe I'm an adult. Honestly, neither can I, and I'm the one wearing the body. The plan for the day was the village chief's house. The other 4 surviving elders had clammed up, and the chief hadn't left his home in years. On the way, we passed Clara, who tried to wave us off. "Don't bother," she said. "He won't come out. We can't even see him." And when we pushed, she finally gave us the saddest story in the village. The village chief spent half his life finding food for everyone and couldn't save a single person he loved. His little daughter died the same year he found the fertile soil, not even 5 years old. His wife was killed by a monster 10 years later, and his only son got driven insane by the monsters, and now wanders the village day and night, raving. The chief's hair went white overnight, and he shut his door and never opened it again. Everyone got very solemn and sad, except 2 people. Wu Jinyang, who sneered, like tragedy was beneath him. And me, because I just realized something. "Sister," I said, "this crazy son, is he skinny, barely any hair? Looks like a bird's nest, wears rags, keeps telling stories?" Clara stared. "That's him. Have you seen him?" "Sure," I said brightly. "He asked me for buns last night." So the mad son and my midnight bun buddy were the same broken old man, the one who kept begging a dead treasure to save the village. And when I told the group his story, the version where the chief traded a treasure for the villagers' lives, the whole thing cracked open. Because Shu Ruoxi latched onto it. Traded a treasure for their lives? What treasure? Traded with who? And then Wu Jinyang did his favorite thing, which is answer a question with a better question. How did the chief find water and soil at the bottom of a cliff, in a place that had been barren for generations? If it was down there all along, why was the land dead for so long? Which meant the water and soil were never found. They were traded for, from the start. And then Chen Haoran, of all people, had the light bulb. "It's not the soil or the water that makes things grow," he said, staring. "It's the hellfire." Because we'd all seen it. Grass growing green inside the flames, monsters dying and instantly climbing back out of the fire, life that refuses to stay dead. Hellfire doesn't just burn, it resurrects, it grows. So as long as it burns, nothing here ever truly dies, and there's no peace to be had. The chief's miracle and the village's curse are the same fire. Even Wu Jinyang looked mildly impressed, which for him is a standing ovation. Me, I missed the whole revelation because I was digging through my bag for candy and discovered, to my absolute horror, that I was out. I shook the bag upside down. Nothing. I put the bag over my whole head and stood there in the dark of it, mourning, while everyone walked off without me. Wu Jinyang came back, plucked the bag off my head like lifting a bucket, and pointed his chin at the others already halfway down the road. I said thanks and jogged to catch up. He walked ahead with a cold face like he hadn't just unbagged a grieving fish. The chief's house sat in the deadest corner of the village, surrounded by empty homes, smelling of mold and old wood. Lin Zian knocked politely. Nothing. Su Ruoxi called out politely. Nothing. So Wu Jinyang, done with manners, walked up and raised his boot to kick the door in. And I thought, now that is a good idea. So I stood next to him, raised my own foot to match, and to really commit I shouted, "Ha!" 2 of us, feet up, about to boot down a grieving old man's door. Lin Zian nearly had a stroke and froze us both mid-kick with a wall of psychic power. Here's the part that mattered, and only I caught it. The instant that power touched Wu Jinyang, his eyes changed. Black, gone. Golden, with vertical slit pupils, like a snake, except no snake ever looked that ancient or that hungry. Just a flash. Then he shut his eyes, pressed his thumb to the ring, swallowed whatever wanted out, and his human eyes came back. Nobody else saw it. I saw it. And I thought, so I'm not the only thing in this village wearing a person as a costume. Shu Ruoxi scolded me for trying to kick down the door, said it was rude, the chief would get angry and tell us nothing. I thought about it hard. Then I offered my solution. Fine, I'll just punch him twice instead. She grabbed me by the ear and dragged me off, hissing that I kick whoever I want, hit whoever I want, and I'm not even ashamed, I'm proud. Which, yeah, back in the sea, I never lost a fight. Every fish that mouthed off got humbled. My mom used to beat me for it afterward and lecture me till I cried and swore I'd be more careful next time. More careful about getting caught, mostly. Wu Jinyang watched Shu Ruoxi drag me by the ear, and once we were alone, asked flat out, "What are you playing at?" "Nothing," I said, and quickly stepped in front of him to block his view, because Lin Zian and Shu Ruoxi were having a moment over there, and my whole mission depends on this man never falling deeper for the female lead. He looked over my head anyway, because he's a foot taller, and I am not a great wall, glanced at the 2 of them with zero emotion, and let me tow him off by the sleeve. "Don't touch me," he said, staring at my hand on his arm like it was a slug. I let go. Then we had the argument that tells you everything about him. He called Shu Ruoxi's whole polite approach useless. "What's the point of manners?" he said. In this world, the strong are respected, and real strong people don't need to grovel for it. Only defective products and hypocrite white doves beg for approval. And I thought about it and agreed, actually, out loud, which surprised him. Because every time I beat up a fish, I felt great. But then I told him the other half, the part my mom drilled into me. Strength is relative. There's always someone stronger than the strong, and the strong become weak too. I used to have a father, you know. Really sad story. He didn't ask. But he stopped walking, and he said, quiet and certain, I don't need anyone's approval. And then, with the sun breaking through the gray clouds and lighting him up bone white, he lifted his chin and said the thing. If strength is relative, then become the strongest in the world and crush everyone beneath your feet. And for 1 second I saw it. The ending the system warned me about. This man standing on top of a mountain of everyone he ever knew, reigning over corpses. And I stopped, and I got quiet, and I stopped being funny for a minute. Because I'm here to make sure that ending never happens. And looking at his face in that light, I understood for the first time how far he had already walked down that road. A villager shuffled past us, slow and wrong, and I recognized him, so I said hi. Hey uncle, you found your head? Wu Jinyang's head snapped around, because he saw what I saw. Cloudy dead eyes, gray skin. It was the headless corpse from the forest, day one, same clothes, except now walking around with its head screwed back on. Wu Jinyang yanked me behind him, flicked his windblade, and off came the head again. Body and head hit the dirt separately. I peeked out and, honestly, felt a little bad. He just found his head, I said, and you already took it off. He gave me a look that said, stop talking, so I covered my mouth and mumbled that I wouldn't say anything more. Then the others showed up to a fresh pile of dismembered villager and immediately assumed the worst. Shu Ruoxi pulled a gun on Wu Jinyang. You broke the truce, you killed a villager. Chen Haoran piled on, still nursing his grudge. And I peeked out from behind Wu Jinyang and explained, patiently, that he hadn't killed anyone because the uncle was already dead. That the man was the headless corpse from the forest, which, if you follow it, means the dead are getting up, finding their heads, and walking back into the village wearing villager faces. Right on cue, the corpse on the ground reached out, groped around, found its own head, and put it back on. Something rippled under its skin. And then a wail cry boomed from the church. White light rained down, the church's blessing fired, and the corpse's skin burned off to reveal brown muscle and tentacles. It was a forest monster, wearing a dead man, inside the village walls. That was the bad news nobody wanted. The blessing is supposed to keep monsters out, and one had walked right in disguised as a corpse, which meant the blessing was weakening. Kairos's protection is running out of battery, and when it dies, the monsters slaughter everyone, and if the villagers die, we fail the mission instantly. Shu Ruoxi's face went gray. The monster tried to bolt across the rooftops, and Wu Jinyang, bored, flicked his wrist and a transparent rope materialized out of nothing and yanked it out of the sky. Solid psychic power, conjured like it costs him nothing. Chen Haoran nearly fainted at the sight. And me? I was delighted. You can turn ropes into ropes? Amazing! Can you make other stuff? Can you make a gun? A little bird? A flower? Some grass? No, none of those, he said, more clipped each time. Then what can you do? I asked, poking his sleeve. He turned, looked at me, waved his hand, and suddenly my mouth would not open. I know how to do this, he said, and breathed a sigh of relief into the beautiful silence. I was not going to stand for that. I hopped in place, whimpering through sealed lips, while the grown-ups talked over me about the blessing weakening. And then, Wu Jinyang and the Pope cooked up the plan I really didn't like. Force the villagers to talk, drag every last one of them to the square, no exceptions, and squeeze the truth about the hellfire out of them. The Pope, who'd spent years playing the patient saint, suddenly went hard and ordered it. And I stood there with my mouth glued shut, watching a mob get organized, feeling more and more like something was very wrong. So I made an executive decision. I backed up, kicked off, and headbutted Wu Jinyang right between the shoulder blades like an angry sheep. Solid hit, knocked him forward 2 steps. His face did a rare thing, which is surprise. And I strode off with my hands behind my back like a tiny thug who just settled a score. Marcus caught the whole thing and shot his boss a nervous look. Wu Jinyang's knuckles went crack, but my mouth was still sealed, so honestly, worth it. By the time they herded the villagers into the square, it was full dark, a huge bonfire roaring in the center, the Pope up on the platform with his scepter, and the captured monsters dragged out in front of a crowd that had no idea the night was about to go very, very wrong. In the square, the Pope played the martyr. Clear conscience, kept you safe for years, and now the blessing is dying, and this monster only got in because it's failing, and once it's gone, we all burn. Very moving. Meanwhile, Blue Dragon had guns on every villager who so much as muttered, so the moving speech had a captive audience. Wu Jinyang pulled on black leather gloves, walked down, and clamped the thrashing monster's head still with his bare hands, like a man holding a garden hose. "Tell us the truth about this village," he said, "and I'll put out the fire." Dead silence. So I decided to help, because standing around is boring, and I already knew the answer. I walked right up to the monster. "Why won't you talk?" I asked the villagers. "Because these monsters are related to you, aren't they?" Big reaction. Owen, Clara's boyfriend, snapped, "Anan, what are you saying?" So I asked him, "Do you recognize this monster?" He said, "Of course not, it's a monster." And I said, mild as milk, "But a little while ago he was a villager just like you." Then I reached my hand back for the cloth. See, I'd noticed Wu Jinyang quietly pocketing the torn pieces of the dead man's clothes days ago, so I stuck my hand out and waited. He stared at my open palm, then at my back, and his eye did the twitch. When did she notice I took those? He handed the cloth over anyway. All part of the plan, he told himself, which is what he tells himself every time I steamroll him. And I carried the scraps to Clara. "Sister, do you know this outfit?" Owen went pale. "Those are Dylan's clothes. He went missing days ago." "Yes," I said. "The monster was wearing them even in human form." The old villagers tried the cover story again. Monsters disguise themselves as our dead relatives. They wear their skin. That's how they fool us. So I poked the hole in it. You already know your relatives are dead. How does a thing wearing their face fool you when you know they're gone? And when the monsters wear human skin, they still look like corpses, right? So the disguise is terrible. So how did smart grown-ups fall for it? Unless they wanted to. The old man's eyes slid away and wouldn't come back. And Wu Jinyang, watching the man's hands shake, smiled his knife smile. Looks like that's really the case. Here's the part I could see and nobody else could. Those monsters aren't disguised villagers. They are the villagers. Skin, bone, inside and out, all the way down. They just turned into monsters at the end. And I know, because from the second I first saw them, they've been screaming. Not with mouths, with want. I can hear desire, and theirs never shuts up. Break into the village, find you, kill you. So I crouched down in front of old Silas, eyes big and honest, and asked the question that made the sweat break out on his back. They were villagers, too. What did they ever do to you? They're already dead. Why are you still so angry at them? And why are they so angry at you? Silas stumbled backward and sat down hard, and I finally understood the shape of it, even if he wouldn't say it. These dead didn't just die. Something was owed. Somebody had a very, very big grudge to settle. Wu Jinyang got impatient and ground his boot into Silas's hand. "Speak! Why do the monsters want to kill you?" And from the edge of the square, a cracked old voice answered instead. That was my fault. The village chief, the one who hadn't left his house in years. White hair, shaking on a cane, dragging himself in to confess. The young villagers swarmed him, their childhood hero, while Clara, the Pope's own daughter, stood off alone because the Pope wouldn't even look at his own kid. So I went and held Clara's hand. Hers was cold. Mine's always warm. She sighed and patted my head. Then the chief told the truth, and it's the ugly heart of this whole place. When he fell off that cliff all those years ago, he didn't find water and soil. He heard a voice underground, a voice that knew him, knew what he wanted, and offered a deal. Give me what I want, and this dead land will grow. And what it wanted was food, and the food was people. Pure souls. So the chief and the old villagers threw their own neighbors down the crack in the earth, watched them get swallowed, and yes, the crops came up. Life from the dead. That was the treasure. That was the trade. But the dead didn't stay down. They walked home. So they threw them off the cliff again, and again they came back. Until the church arrived and burned them with blessing, which didn't kill them either, just peeled them into full monsters. And that's when the hellfire lit. Their sin was the spark. They kept the secret from the young ones for decades, let them worship the hero, while the murdered climbed out of the ground every night, screaming to come home and settle the bill. The young villagers stared at their hero like the floor had dropped out, and I finally asked the chief the question I'd been holding. Village chief, your son said you traded a treasure to save the village. What was your treasure? He said he didn't understand. So I laid it out, counting on my fingers, gentle as I could. Your son's alive. Your wife died to a monster years later. Only your daughter died that first year, the year the food came. So I think your treasure was your daughter." And the old man went white and shook and screamed at me to stop talking. I didn't, because I needed him to hear it. "Humans are so strange," I told him. "If you call something a treasure, it means a child you love more than anything. So why did you give her up so easily? You're angry at me for saying it, but your daughter should be even angrier, don't you think?" Wu Jinyang lifted me out of there by the back of my collar before the old man could combust. "His daughter," he said flatly, walking me off. "You knew that too," I gasped, and he just stroked his ring and said it wasn't hard to guess. And then he said the thing that told me exactly how broken he was, because all humans are equally hypocritical and disgusting. And I argued, because they're not. My mom's good, Ashi's good, Minghua's good, Chen Haoran is barely technically good. He said everyone's the same and walked away, told me to stay away from him. I followed anyway, waved, "See you tomorrow, Wu Jinyang." He left without a word. A man who's decided the whole world is garbage doesn't waste words on a fish. Now, the ceremony. Wu Jinyang and the Pope decided the fix was to sacrifice the guilty old villagers, because when he'd stabbed that first sinner days ago, the flames had gone out. So the plan was, kill the sinners, kill the fire. And the good and noble white dove, Shu Ruoshi and Lin Zian, the ones who preach protecting everyone, quietly agreed. Sacrifice a few to save the many. Best option. "It's just a trial," Shu Ruoshi told Chen Haoran. "Not real." Chen Haoran hated it and shut up anyway. The second night, the altar, the moon climbing, the old villagers kneeling, the knives up. And me and Chen Haoran crouched in the corner sharing bread, which mostly meant me staring at his bread until he tore off half just to make me stop. He asked if this would really put out the fire. "Sure," I said. He got mad because I'd told Lin Zian the same thing, and now I was saying I could break it. "Because it doesn't like death," I said. He frowned. "Hellfire lives on eating people. How does it not like death?" "Oh," I said, mouthful. "But that's not hellfire." He froze. "What? It's not hellfire," I repeated and patted the ground. "Hellfire's still down there. That white fire in the forest? That's blessing. Blessing likes protection and healing and luck. It doesn't like death. It's been up here this whole time burning weakly, holding the real hellfire underground, too weak to kill the monsters, just barely holding the lid on. That's why the white flame goes out every time they kill someone. You feed death to the thing that hates death, and it dies." Chen Haoran's eyes went huge, and he lunged for the altar, screaming, "Stop!" Too late. The knives came down, blood ran into the grooves, and the white blessing flames went out one by one, near to far, like streetlights at dawn. And the forest went quiet. Chen Haoran sagged with relief. "See," he said, "Jiang Anan was lying, it's fine." Then green fire tore out of the ground, everywhere, eerie, flickering, and the scorched plants came roaring back to life in it. And far away in the village, in the house where the young ones were locked up, Clara looked out the window and smiled. Because this was the real hellfire. They didn't extinguish anything. They killed the only thing holding it down. And you should hold on to that image because that's the whole trap. Wu Jinyang's Blue Dragon mission was never to put out the fire. It was to light it. He spent this entire cooperation feeding the good guys just enough truth to make them murder the blessing with their own hands. He didn't lie to them. He handed them the knife and let their own goodness do the rest. Su Ruoshi put it together a beat too late, marched up to him, and screamed, "You lied to us!" And Wu Jinyang glanced at the mission complete notification glowing on his AI and smiled and said, "I lied to you, so? Your mission wasn't to extinguish the fire, it was to set it loose." And he shrugged like it cost him nothing, because it didn't. Lin Zian and Su Ruoshi and Chen Haoran got in his face, and Wu Jinyang raised one finger and dropped all three of them with a psychic power attack, brains screaming, Chen Haoran on his knees. "Who gave you the right to yell at me?" he said, cold as the moon. A non-psychic reject from Zone E, or the useless heirs of two failing families, mere ants. Then he strolled off, leaving them gasping, Lin Zian's fists clenched around a promise to beat him someday. "Get in line, buddy!" But the real reveal came from the priest. That poor believer had finally worked out that his living God had just doomed everyone on purpose, and he called it out. "You betrayed the gods!" Wu Jinyang didn't even turn around. "So what?" And the priest, disillusioned and desperate, pulled a knife from his robe and stabbed him square in the back. The blade hit and stopped, like stabbing stone. and Wu Jinyang slowly turned, and the priest finally saw what I'd been catching glimpses of all week. Dark brown scales crawling up his neck, shrinking fine along his jaw. Golden eyes, vertical slit pupils, ancient and empty. Not a snake, something worse and older. He reached out with a hand that wasn't a hand anymore, a scaled claw with talons, and punched it clean through the priest's chest, and pulled out the man's still-beating heart, and looked at it the way you'd look at a stone. Then the scales sank back under his skin, his human face returned, and he wiped the blood off his pale fingers with a white handkerchief, like he'd spilled tea. So, my romance target isn't a man, he's a monster wearing one, which, honestly, same, takes one to know one. And then the last piece clicked, and it was the Black Dahlias. The Pope walked up to the fresh corpse of his own priest, without a flicker of fear, and smiled a mad little smile. He's dead. Now no one can stop me. My lord, you'll help me claim the hellfire, won't you? Because the Pope was never the patient saint. The Pope is the traitor. He planted a whole road of betrayal flowers outside his own church. He doesn't want to protect anyone. He wants the fire's power to raise the dead all for himself. And Wu Jinyang, looking at this frenzied old man's naked greed, went quiet as deep water, and then nodded. Sure, deal. Two monsters shaking hands over a burning village, and somewhere in the middle of it, one small fish taking mental notes on exactly how far gone her assignment really is. While all that was happening, I was, and I want to stress this, off getting water. I strolled back over a burnt tree with my bag and found the three of them wrecked on the ground, and Chen Haoran immediately started wailing that I knew the fire was blessing and didn't tell them. So why didn't I say something? You didn't ask, I said. He screamed that I'd watched the mission fail on purpose, which stung because I hadn't. I've been working very hard to push the plot forward the whole time. If you don't ask me a question, how am I supposed to know which thing you want to know? Honestly. Humans. Shuruoshi, calmer, asked how I knew the forest flames were blessing. Because it feels the same as the little blessing light you were holding, I said, stuffing my water bottle into my bag. She stared at me for a long time. She could not understand a person who judges the world by feeling, and could understand even less that the feeling kept being right. But here's the part everyone missed while they were busy declaring total defeat. Chen Haoran moaned that the mission had failed, and I looked at him like he'd grown a second head. Why did it fail? Isn't it a good thing the hellfire's finally burning? He gaped. A good thing? The white fire's gone, the monsters are coming, everyone dies. And I patted his shoulder and gave him my mom's line, the one that turns this whole disaster right side up. To get rid of a seed buried in the ground, you first have to let it grow. You can't pull up a weed you can't reach. The real hellfire spent all this time hiding underground where nobody could touch it, letting the weak little blessing take the blame and the heat. It was never going to die down there, so it had to come up. It had to surface, get big, get bold, get within reach. And now it has. And Lin Xian and Su Ruoshi checked their AI, and sure enough, no mission failed notice. Just a fire, finally out in the open where it could be killed. Su Ruoshi gave me a long, thoughtful look. The dumb little fish kept being right, and it was starting to unsettle her. So the mission clarified. Both jobs, protect the villagers and kill the hellfire, are actually the same job now. Kill the fire and the monsters stop coming back. But the fire's stronger than ever, and sacrificing villagers won't work anymore. That was only ever killing the blessing. So how do you kill a thing that resurrects everything, including itself? And Lin Xian's eyes landed on the map, on one thing we'd all walked past and flinched away from. The blood tree. Deep in the fire, veins of red, draining psychic power out of anyone who came near. Blessing doesn't drain power, hellfire does. So the tree doesn't belong to the blessing. The tree is the fire's heart, growing right where the lie was planted. Ask me what's actually sleeping at the roots of a tree that eats souls, in a village built on a secret trade with a voice underground. Because that's the real boss of this instance, and I already knew its name the first time I saw it painted on a church wall. So we went to the blood tree, and since I'm the only one the fire won't touch, I walked straight into the heart of it, while everyone else stayed back choking on drained power, and I pulled a child out of the roots. A little red-haired girl, asleep, glowing with a green fire in her chest, the core of the whole thing. I carried her out and the blood tree collapsed behind me, and I named her Tiny One, because I name everything, and because she felt like something that had been down in the dark far too long. And while I was doing that, the blood tree did something to Wu Jinyang that I only found out about later. It showed him a vision, the tree's specialty. and you need to hear what it showed him because it's the whole ending in a single frame. In the vision, Wu Jinyang saw himself in wedding clothes, face painted like an actor, having murdered the real groom and taken his place, leading a veiled bride by the hand toward the altar like a jackal guarding treasure. And the bride lifted her veil, and it was me. And that other Wu Jinyang knelt down, pressed his cheek to my hand, looked up with his whole heart in his eyes and asked, "Anan, do I look good today? I wore your favorite makeup. Please, please love me." And when the me in the vision pulled her hand away in disgust, a tear cut a line through his painted face, and he panicked because you can't cry, the makeup will smear, and then she really won't love you. The real Wu Jinyang watched his own future beg like a dog and filled up with rage. That couldn't be him. He would never. No one is worthy of his affection. They all deserve to die. And he tore himself out of the vision, back to the collapsed tree and the actual me, standing there holding Tiny One and blinking at him. And you should file that image away, the groom in smeared makeup whispering, "Please love me," because the story just told you exactly how this ends, and the man it's about would rather die than believe it. Wu Jinyang came out of that vision looking at me with fresh murder in his eyes. "Give her to me," he said, pointing at Tiny One, colder than he'd ever been. And I hugged the child and said no. "I carried her out," I told him, "so I'm the one who gets to keep her." He said, "Do you think you have the right to refuse?" I said, "I carried her. Of course I'm qualified," which is airtight logic if you ask me. But I had questions first. "What do you need the fire for?" "None of your business," he said. "Wu Jinyang, I don't think this spark is a good thing," I told him. "Look, it drains your own power. Nothing good comes from holding it." He just crossed his arms. So we stood there in a stalemate until I sighed, because when he sets his jaw like that, it means absolutely necessary, and I walked over to hand her across. And right as I did, I looked up past his shoulder and saw the Pope, standing behind me, pointing a gun at my back. Wu Jinyang saw it too. Our eyes met, and I smiled at him, because I couldn't help it, even then. He took the child and he stepped back 2 paces. He didn't warn me. He didn't move the gun. He just stepped out of the blood spray radius. And I felt my smile fade a little, and I lowered my head, and I asked him one last thing. "Wu Jinyang, do you like Ashi?" And he gave that sarcastic little curl of the lip. "I won't like anyone. Not the female lead, not anyone, because everyone is equally inferior and filthy to him, powered or not, mutant or human, all of it repulsive." And I nodded, because by then I already knew. "That's true," I murmured. And the next second the gun went off, and a flower of blood bloomed on my chest, and the world spun, and I dropped dead at his feet, kicking up a little cloud of dust. My blood got on his shoes. He stepped back so it wouldn't. That's the whole man in one motion. The Pope walked up, rubbing his hands, asked if Tiny One was the fire starter, and Wu Jinyang, after a pause, handed her over. Still had the church mission to finish, and he figured the fire would come back to him eventually. The Pope cradled her, drunk on the power inside her, muttering that the fire needs more food, and carried her off toward the cliff to feed it. And Wu Jinyang looked down at my corpse one more time. No AI protection now. She's really dead, he thought. She'll be buried here forever. And he remembered the vision, the groom, the begging, and he smiled, relieved. "See? Just an illusion, she's dead. That can never happen now." He walked away, and he did not see the tiny green heart drop out of the flame, drift down, land on my chest, and sink in. Down at the bottom of the cliff, my body lay in the dirt, and the system started its goodbye. Host has no vital signs. Beginning detachment. Exit in 3, 2. And then a weak little blessing flame, the last gasp of the thing that just got murdered, flickered up around me. White specks landed on my burned arms and my shot-through chest. The black scabs fell off, fresh skin came up underneath, and the green heart from the seeds started beating in the hole where the bullet took mine. When the blessing burned out, my wounds were closed, and the green heart had sunk into my chest for good. Beep! System malfunction, restarting. Reboot successful, host vital signs detected. I opened my eyes, sat up, brushed myself off, and said, "System, don't leave yet, I have questions." The poor thing had watched a corpse uncorpse itself, and was, for once, rattled. But it answered. First question. Your story was wrong at the start. You told me Wu Jinyang loves Ashi. He told me he doesn't love anyone. Long silence. Then, he should have loved the female lead. Should have, but didn't. So you don't actually control this world, do you? Silence, which is a yes. Second question. What was your real story? Not the one you told me, the one you hoped for. And after a long standoff, it cracked. In the intended story, Su Ruoxi and Lin Zian grow strong and win, and the villain Wu Jinyang, secretly in love with Su Ruoxi, sacrifices himself to save her in the end, gives up everything for love. That's the ending it wanted. But the real Wu Jinyang didn't fall for anyone. He killed everyone and burned the world down. The story went off the rails, and the system dragged in soul after soul to shove it back on track. Third question. The 194 before me, how did they fail? First, they tried making Wu Jinyang love the female lead. Failed. Then they gave up and tried to just kill him. Also failed. Then they sent players to romance him directly, reform him from the inside. Like me. And every single one got killed fast, no matter the approach. Nobody survives the finale. Nobody except Wu Jinyang himself. I smacked my lips. What cold-blooded humans. I've read 1,000 fairy tales and never met a villain this far below freezing, colder than the Arctic in winter. Then the system left, and I stood up. And here's where I stopped pretending, at least to you. Because as I walked away from that cliff, the dead ground came back to life behind me. Withered trees threw out branches. Green leaves unrolled in seconds. Weeds bloomed little yellow flowers. Birds dropped out of the cliff, hatched, grew feathers, and flew, all in the space of a few steps. Life pouring out of my footprints. That's called newborn. The old god who gives life to the seed so it sprouts, to the child so it grows. And there was a fish painted on a church wall who does exactly that, whose left eye reverses the past and right eye sees the future, who comes up from the deep to bless and to curse. His name is Kairos. And I stopped to eat one of the little yellow flowers I'd just grown, and it was disgustingly sour, and I spat it out, because being a god does not mean you have taste. But you get it now, right? The dumb little fish who can't work stairs and eats butterflies? That's the thing this whole cult has been praying to. I've just been slumming it. While I was busy resurrecting and interrogating my own boss, things went bad in the church. Wu Jinyang and the Pope told everyone they never saw me, so as far as the team knew, I was dead and gone. Shu Ruoxi kept messaging a corpse. Then the Pope put Tiny One on the altar, penned the villagers in the middle, and announced the truth. This child is the core of Hellfire, the village chief's daughter, fed to the fire and fused with it, and her energy will refill the blessing and summon our god. And to wake the god, the fire needs food. Who volunteers? Dead silence from the same believers who'd been screaming their faith a minute ago. So the Pope smiled and said, "Then let the villagers go first. You've taken so much from Hellfire, time to give back." Blue dragons surrounded everyone, and Su Ruoxi's team, chewed up from a night of fighting, got captured in minutes. The Pope had a young villager killed on the altar, blood on the stone, and the flame in Tiny One's chest flared brighter. Who's next? And then he looked at Clara, his own daughter. "Since she's my daughter," he said, "she has an even greater duty to give herself to the god." Even Chen Haoran was horrified. He'd kill his own kid? Owen threw himself in front of Clara, offered to die in her place, and the Pope just laughed, because they were all going to die anyway. "Come here, Clara." And Clara, gentle, smiling Clara who fed me eggs and patted my head, started walking toward him. And that's when I strolled back into the church, caked head to toe in yellow mud, twigs in my hair, because on the way I'd found a lovely pond and rolled around in it. I tapped Su Ruoxi on the shoulder. She turned, screamed, and asked who I was, because I was unrecognizable under the mud. "Ashi, it's me, Anan!" And I grabbed her head in my muddy hands to check whether her brain had finally broken. She shoved me off going, "You rolled in a puddle, get away!" And I nodded, delighted, because yes, I had. Lin Zian was just glad I was alive. I tried to hug both of them, and they both fled from the mud, and I chased them with my arms open, and for 1 second, it was almost a normal day. But nobody else noticed me come back, because everyone was staring at Clara. Because Owen, holding her hand, felt it change. Her fingers turned into blood-red flower petals, and then all of her did. Clara dissolved into a storm of crimson petals right in his arms, and the petals swirled and reformed into a small red-haired girl with a sinister little laugh. A girl who looked exactly like Tiny One on the altar, the village chief's daughter. Because Clara was never a person. Clara was a mask, and the thing wearing it had been down in the dark a very, very long time, waiting for someone kind enough, or foolish enough, to let it back up into the light. Marcus figured it out fast and whispered it to Wu Jinyang. Clara is the village chief's daughter's other self. She and the Pope had been in cahoots the whole time, using all of us. Because Clara's true form was trapped inside the blood tree, pinned underground by the blessing, and she couldn't get out alone. So she teamed with the greedy Pope, who couldn't reach the fire himself, and the two of them used Wu Jinyang's arrival to do what neither could: kill the blessing. And once the white flame went out, Clara's real body could finally rise. The mantis stalks the cicada, and the little red bird was behind them both. Everyone thought they were the schemer. Every single one of them was the mark. Wu Jinyang, the man who is never used, cracked his knuckles very quietly. Clara turned back into a woman, walked to Owen, leaned on him, and said in a voice like a corpse, "I'm Clara, Owen." He shoved her away, and then she told him everything, and it's the saddest thing in this whole rotten village. She was the treasure, the chief's little daughter. Her father told her he was taking her to find candy. He took her to the cliff and threw her off. She watched the ground crack open and swallow her. And down there in the dark, it was cold, and the roots drank her blood, and the insects ate her body, and she screamed for her daddy to come back and take her home, and she'd never ask for candy again. And nobody came. So to keep from dying, she devoured the hellfire. And she got strong, strong enough to burn the insects to ash, strong enough to eat every new sacrifice they threw down after her. She wanted to climb back to the surface. And then the church came, and the blessing pressed her flat against the underside of the world, and she stayed down there in the cold and the dark, year after year after year, waiting. And she made herself a promise. If she ever got back up, she'd kill everyone, turn them all into monsters like her, so no one could ever abandon her again. She grabbed one of the monsters and dragged it to Owen. "Look," she laughed, tears pouring down. "This is my father. Look what he is now. Wouldn't it be nice if everyone was like this?" And Owen, wrecked, asked why. They were living fine. The guilty ones are already dead. And Clara's eyes went cold. "But I want everyone to die with me. That's the thing my whole species is supposed to keep in balance. Life and death, growth and rot, the seed and the fire." And a little girl got thrown into the dark by the one person who called her a treasure. And she came back up as the exact monster they always accused the dead of being. Nobody in this village was innocent, and nobody deserved it less than she did. Clara's brother, the mad old son who'd been raving in rags for decades, threw himself in the way and took a branch through the chest to protect Owen, croaking sister with his last breath. And then something strange happened. Clara tried to turn her dead brother into a monster, wrap him in branches, bring him back the way the fire brings everything back. And he stayed dead. Just a corpse. She tried again, more branches. Nothing. Wu Jinyang caught it. He pulled his gun and shot a nearby monster, and instead of melting into the ground and climbing back out like they always did, it stayed down. Dead for real. And he looked at Tiny One on the altar, and the flame in her chest had gone from bright, living green to dull, dark red. Marcus gasped. The spark lost its power to revive. But Wu Jinyang shook his head, and this is the part that matters. "No," he said, "this is the true spark. Every record on the continent says the fire is dark red, absorbs psychic power, nothing more. No record ever mentioned green flames. No record ever said the fire could bring back the dead. So the revival was never the fire's. Something else was making it happen. Something that touched this world and gave it life. And now that something has vanished, and the green is gone, and the dead stay dead." He pressed his thumb to his ring, genuinely confused for once. What was it? What thing? And you know the answer, and I know the answer, and it was, at that exact moment, walking around the church covered in pond mud. The god of life had been standing in this world for days, and everything near her came back. She died, the green went out, the resurrection stopped. Wu Jinyang was one clean thought away from the truth and couldn't make himself reach it. Meanwhile, Clara went feral. Couldn't revive her brother, needed more food, and started draining everyone, villagers and believers alike. The Pope shrieked that she was only supposed to kill villagers, not his followers. "Food is food," she said, and wrapped him up in branches. He begged Wu Jinyang to save him, and Wu Jinyang, rubbing his forehead like a man with a migraine, flicked white fire onto the altar and threw up a barrier that slapped Clara's branches back. The Pope wriggled free, grabbed his blessing scepter, and burned her with it, and she screamed, because the blessing still had a little juice left. Owen threw his own body over her to shield her from it, and in the middle of an apocalypse, Lin Xian looked over and saw me enthusiastically punching and kicking a potted plant. "Anan, wrong target," he yelled. "Oh," I said, and immediately switched to kicking a different potted plant. In my defense, Everything green in that room was technically a suspect. Clara, half burned, whispered her plan to Owen. The blessing's almost dead. If I eat enough people, I won't have to fear it anymore. And her branches went everywhere. Villagers, believers, blue dragon, no difference now. Everyone in the church surrounded her, shooting her branches, and Owen stayed pressed against her, and she smiled up at him like the gentle woman she used to pretend to be. Once I kill them all, we can be together forever, she said. You won't have to become a monster. Just stay human. You won't abandon me, right? And Owen looked at the villagers dying all around him, and looked at the girl who'd been thrown into the dark by her own father, and gave a bitter little laugh, and said, okay. And then he stood up, holding her tight in his arms, and the Pope's scepter came down and ran them both through at once. Ask me what a thrown-away little girl does when the one person who chose to hold her dies in her arms, in a church, at the hands of her own father. Clara screamed for Owen the exact way she'd once screamed for her father from underground, and Owen held her and said, I'm here. And they died together, his blood soaking into her ashes as her branches turned to charcoal and crumbled. On the altar, Tiny One's body fell apart too, leaving just a small, dark red ember. The one person who chose to hold the thrown-away girl chose to die in her arms rather than let her be alone. In this whole rotten village, that was the only clean thing anybody did. The Pope, delighted, went to summon his god. He set his scepter over the flame, the believers circled and chanted the old ocean hymn. The church clock crept toward 12, and the scepter started to spin. But not because of the Pope. It slowed when he pushed it and sped up on its own, and then it swung around and pointed, dead certain, at me. Covered in pond mud, midway through pulling a fat white worm out of my bag to eat, which Chen Haoran smacked out of my hand, because apparently you can't snack during a god summoning. The believers turned, and they knelt. All of them, facing me. And the Pope walked over like he was dragging a mountain, knelt, and held his hands up over his head toward the muddy girl he'd shot in the back that morning. I tilted my head and put my hand in his, and he looked up, and my eyes weren't a fish's anymore. Light poured in the church doors behind me, and the believers chanted, Welcome the arrival of the gods. And the Pope pressed his face to the floor and begged, Please, God, forgive our sins. Surprise! The dumb fish who eats butterflies is the deep-sea god this cult has been bleeding people for. Kairos. Been standing in their church the whole time, licking eggshells. I didn't answer him. I just looked. And whatever the Pope saw in a god's silence, it broke him. He kowtowed one last time, put his own gun in his mouth, and pulled the trigger. Because when you've spent your life doing evil in a god's name, and the god shows up and says nothing, the nothing is the verdict. Blue Dragon's AI pinged, mission failed, because their whole plan died with the Pope. And Wu Jinyang, robbed of his win, went cold and quiet and raised his hand. Lin Zian screamed at the villagers to run. They got a few steps. And then a wave of pure heat rolled out. No flame, just air melting, and every villager turned to dust mid-stride. Alive 1 second, gone the next. Not even ashes left to bury. If he couldn't win, nobody would. Then the AI pulled us all out, and the burning village folded away, and we woke up. Turns out the whole village, the fire, the god, all of it, was a trial, a simulation. We woke in glass hibernation pods in a sci-fi school called Ming Miao Academy, students plugged into a fake story world for training. So that whole nightmare was VR with extra murder. Cool school, great tuition. I climbed out of my pod and immediately got lost, because every room looked identical, rows and rows of pods, like a reincarnation loop. I got tired and leaned on one to rest, and I did not notice it was covered in blue dragon patterns, or that I just pressed a blue button. An alarm went off. Oxygen supply stopped. Oxygen at 21%, 18, 17. I had no idea what oxygen was, but the pod sounded upset, so I pressed the button again to help, and it dropped to 10, 5. Turns out that was the wrong button. Turns out there was someone inside. So I did what any reasonable fish does. I grabbed a fire axe off the wall to chop the pod open and save whoever was suffocating. I hauled it up over my head, wound up, and right then the pod force woke its occupant and slid open on its own, which meant all my heroic axe work was for nothing. The door was never going to open for a threat to my life, only theirs. Suicidal little machine. And lying in the pod, black uniform, gold trim, hands folded on his chest like a very handsome corpse, golden eyes flashing to normal in half a second, was Wu Jinyang. Staring up at the axe I had raised over his face. "You want to kill me?" he asked. I put the axe down and smiled awkwardly. No, I just wanted to save you. Really, he said, glancing at the oxygen button I'd been mashing. Then I should thank you. You're welcome, I said, because I have excellent manners. And he climbed out, leaned down until his dark eyes filled with my reflection, and told me, if you do want to kill me, you're welcome to try, anytime. As long as you have the ability. Practically inviting it. What is wrong with this man, I thought. He's begging to die. Then he asked the real question. How did you survive? And I blinked at him. Survive? When did I die? And he went quiet, staring at me, because he'd watched me get shot and stepped out of the blood spray, and here I was doing my confused puppy face like it never happened. He let it go and walked off, working it out in his own head. The fire seed lost its power to revive once he took it, so the thing that gave it that power must still be out there, and lucky little Jiang Anan must have stumbled onto it and come back. Lucky. He landed on lucky. He was one honest thought from the answer, and he chose lucky, because the alternative was a truth he wasn't ready to hold. I followed him out because I still couldn't find the exit. Stay away from me, he said. I stepped back exactly 1 meter and kept following. He sighed and asked if I genuinely couldn't find my way out, meaning it as an insult, and my eyes went huge. You even know that? He'd been joking. I was not joking. He walked me to the door in defeated silence while I peppered him with questions about where Bandit was, and Marcus and Shi, and he answered none of them, just walked faster. Shu Ruoshi was waiting at the exit, having searched every pod for me. She took one look at Wu Jinyang beside me and yanked me behind her like I was 5. On the way to the dorm, she gave me the lecture. Stay away from Wu Jinyang. We're Zone E people. We can never be at peace with Blue Dragon. They've been watching Zone E for years, dragging people off. Nobody ever hears from them again. Some of them could be our own relatives and friends. Don't you care? And I thought about it and said, honestly, but I feel like an orphan. She stared at me a long moment, because what do you say to that? And just told me, again, to keep away from him. And I nodded, because that part I did agree with. Wu Jinyang really doesn't care whether people live or die. I'd watched him prove it twice now. Then came the dorm, and the dorm had a bed. A real, soft, human bed. I'd slept in plenty of shipwrecks as a fish, but I'd long outgrown squeezing into their little bunks, and this thing was so soft I flopped down and kicked my legs and hugged the blanket, and decided Shi was a wonderful person for having a room with one of these. Small problem. Fish don't really sleep. An hour a day, sometimes 10 minutes, whenever. Back in the sea, I'd be up at all hours listening to narwhals argue about the day's cod, or a humpback complaining about which orca ate her calf, and I'd chime in asking where the little yellow fish were biting. So at 2 in the morning, I was wide awake, beating up my blanket. Take that, monster! Old sun has come for you! Then I lined up my pillow and blanket, shook the pillow's corner like a handshake, and introduced myself. Hello, my name is Jiang Anan. What's yours? Oh, Miko. Nice to meet you, Miko. I'm your grandpa, and I've been captured by a monster. You have to come save me. Full cast. Full plot. 1 fish. Suruoshi lay there with her eyes going hollow and dark-circled until she couldn't take it, got up, loomed over me, and pressed me flat into the pillow. Why aren't you asleep? I don't sleep much. Don't worry about me, I said, waving. She smiled a scary smile and said if I didn't sleep, she'd throw me out the window. I said sleep immediately and tucked in. Note to self, I thought, staring at the ceiling. Play quieter. Also, Shi mentioned something called class. What's class? Sounds important. I thought about it very hard, decided it wasn't, and started snoring. Class, it turns out, was important, and I slept clean through it. Here's the school. Mingyao Academy, on an island, the training ground for genetic mutants, run by the 3 great families, Lu, Shen, and Cape. Everybody's sorted by psychic rank, which is why a non-psychic reject like me should absolutely not be rooming with an S rank like Su Ruoshi. Except I got in through Chen Haoran's family connections, so the rules bent. Lin Xian's the golden boy every girl throws love letters at, including one furious classmate named Li Yuxuan, who cannot stand that he only has eyes for the Zone E girl, Su Ruoshi. And history class was taught by a bearded old professor named Professor Sterling, who still takes attendance out loud like it's the Stone Age. He got to my name and got silence, because I was face down in the dorm, buried in blankets, blissfully unaware that class was a thing that happened at a time. Shu Ruoshi, bless her, deepened her voice and answered here for me, then quick changed her hair and glasses and answered for herself too, running a one-woman roll call con. Professor Sterling glanced up, suspicious, let it slide. The team exhaled. They should not have exhaled. Because Professor Sterling had clocked my empty seat from the start, and he'd been waiting. He assigned a pair project, absent partners autofail, and then read the pairings. Wu Jinyang and Jiang Anan, together. Wu Jinyang, the man who genocided a village yesterday for fun, was now academically shackled to the girl he keeps trying to have killed. He stood and walked out of the classroom. Professor Sterling called after him that field trips were fine, but the grade goes to your parents. Wu Jinyang paused and kept walking. And Lin Xian, watching, said the thing nobody believed. He knows me. If the grade reaches his father's hands, he'll do the work. And your dorm's that way, Shuruo Shi. He's not going to go get Jiang Anan, is he? He was going to go get Jiang Anan. The classroom sat in stunned silence when Wu Jinyang walked back in carrying me, bridal style, asleep, blanket clutched to my chest, hair an absolute disaster, dead to the world. One boy made the mistake of laughing, met Wu Jinyang's eyes, and swallowed it whole. The man who will end you for a glance or a touch, hauling a drooling non-psychic into class like a sack of laundry because a professor threatened to tell his dad. He dropped me in the seat with a face like a thundercloud, and every eye in the room turned, slowly, to Chen Haoran. Chen Haoran, quietly, "Thank you, please don't mention it, ever." The project topic was the origin of the continent, and Marcus, sitting on my other side, was explaining it to his partner, which is also how I learned it, because the second Marcus pulled out a slice of bread, my eyes snapped open, fully awake, homing in like a shark. The history goes like this. 4,000 years ago, a meteorite that didn't belong to Earth crashed down. They call it Dark Star. It wrecked the climate, sank the land, killed most everything, and mutated the survivors into genetic mutants with psychic power. And Dark Star, Marcus whispered, is the essence of the fire. The spark. The same spark Wu Jinyang's been hunting across every trial world. Wu Jinyang tossed me the report and said, "Write it!" I said, "Clear," saluted, and deflated 3 seconds later. "How do I write it?" He began to suspect I couldn't. He handed me a pen. "Write your name first." I drew 6 characters like a chicken had walked through ink. So, can read, can't write. He snatched the pen back cold and started writing it himself. I watched him for a bit, nodded, said, "I've got it now," and held out my hand. He didn't trust me, but he gave me the pen, and I copied his handwriting. Exactly. Every stroke identical, in minutes, the kind of mimicry that made his gaze freeze, because how many people alive can do that? And then he read what I'd written, and it froze him worse. Because I hadn't just copied his hand, I'd filled in the real history. The meteorite that wasn't Earth's, the coexisting fire and ice, the Arctic buried in snow while the tropics cooked, the floods, the sinking land, the mutation. Details even he didn't know, because the catastrophe destroyed most records and the rebuilt world forgot. And at the end, I'd added my own conclusion, big and firm. In short, this kind of thing cannot be allowed to remain. It must be eliminated as soon as possible. He stared at the word eliminate a long time. Then, casual as anything, asked why. Why does Dark Star need to be destroyed? Because it doesn't belong to Earth, I said. Any extra power it gives humans only ends in destruction. How did you know that? He asked, eyes darkening. I heard it, I said. Lots of people say it. Which, to me, was true. Ships passing over the sea talked. Fish from every ocean traded gossip. I picked up plenty about the land without ever setting foot on it. But Wu Jinyang and Marcus heard I heard it from Zone E, and Marcus relaxed. Wu Jinyang didn't. He walked out after class and asked Marcus a strange question. Do you know what the most powerful person looks like? Marcus didn't. She knows everything, Wu Jinyang said, and makes everyone believe she knows nothing. And he hoped, genuinely hoped, that it was a coincidence, that I was just a lucky idiot who overheard things. Because anyone who figures out what he privately calls the spark plan gets eliminated. And I'd just written the word eliminate in his own handwriting, about the exact thing he's building his life around. Then Wu Jinyang got called home, and this is where I hand the story to him for a minute, because what happened in that castle is the reason he is the way he is, and I didn't learn it till later. The Liu family castle sits at the eastern edge of the continent, drawbridge and forests and rows of servants who go silent and bow when he passes. He walked through all of it to the great hall, where a man in a silver-white robe stood with his back turned. Wu Jinyang stopped, lowered his head and said respectfully, Father, Wu Chengkai. Same delicate, handsome face as his son, but crowned in white hair and fine wrinkles. He didn't ask how his son was. He held out his hand and said, Give me the fire. And Wu Jinyang pulled the dark red spark from his storage space and handed it over. Wu Chunkai looked into that dark flame and finally smiled. We found the first spark at last. And then his voice went soft in a way it never did for his living son. If we find the rest of the embers, your mother can be resurrected. And Wu Jinyang felt nothing, no longing, just cold, because he knew the whole shape of it, and it's monstrous. The spark plan is this: collect every ember scattered across the worlds, reform them into the whole dark star, and to reform it, the dark star has to drink endless psychic power, all of it, which means every psychic on the continent dies to feed it, including him. His father wants to burn every powered person alive to bring one dead woman back. Why should I be happy, Wu Jinyang said, that I'd give my life to save her? And his father looked at him, quiet, and dropped the last stone. But you don't have many years left to live anyway. What's wrong with trading a dying life for your mother's? And there it is, the thing under all the ice. Wu Jinyang is dying, running out of years, and his own father has already done the math, weighed his doomed son against his dead wife, and decided the son is just fuel. No wonder he thinks everyone's disposable. He learned it at home. No wonder he looks at a world of people and sees garbage. The first person to call him garbage was the man who made him. Wu Jinyang froze for a long moment. And then, slowly, he started to laugh. Ask me what a dying boy does when he finds out he's worth more to his family as Ash than as a son, and the only thing in any world that's ever looked at him without flinching is a muddy little fish who keeps trying to feed him eggshells. Not long after, they plugged us into the next trial, and this one dropped us in a swamp. New mission, 3 words long and completely unhinged. Fulfill Flora's wish. Fulfill the wish of somebody named Flora. That's it. Thanks, AI. Very clear. I started this one by falling in the water and not waking up, which made Wu Jinyang's face go black, because he lost the last trial because of me, and now here I was drowning on turn 1. He was about to write me off entirely when Bandit, my good boy, showed up and licked my face awake. Bandit! Long time no see! I hugged him and forgot all about being dead again. Wu Jinyang set me on the ground with a face like a slammed door. The swamp had boats, only 6 of them, 2 seats each, for a trial that this time had over 40 people, so we crossed in shifts. Before that, though, I caught a tadpole to give Wu Jinyang, because I like giving people things. For you, I said, dropping it in his palm. Marcus howled. Jiang Anan, that's not a frog, that's a toad. Everyone froze. Wu Jinyang stared at the toad in his hand. Chen Haoran lost it. And I, ever the eager student, asked, "What's a toad?" Nobody answered, so I spent the next while quietly muttering, "What is a toad?" which remains an open question. Wu Jinyang made the boat oars row themselves with a flick of power, which I called amazing, and we drifted through fog toward a castle that never seemed to get closer. And in that fog, we met the crow men. Tall black things, wrapped in wings, crow heads with bright yellow eyes, long scythes in their hands, drifting past us slow. They couldn't see us in the fog, so the rule was simple. Hold your breath, don't make a sound, don't move. Chen Haoran nearly died of fear doing it, and I filed the crowmen next to the toad in my growing list of things I did not have words for yet. The swamp got shallow, all haystacks and reeds and violets, and everyone used psychic power to walk on top of the muck. Everyone except me and Wu Jinyang, because the AI had chained us together again. Cooperate or get eliminated. He bared his teeth in that awful smile, because the machine had figured out how to blackmail him with me. But there was a spark somewhere in here he needed, so he took a breath, bent down, and offered his back. I cheered, slung on my giant bag, scooped up my 40-kilo Doberman, and climbed aboard. He sank a little into the mud. "Don't move," he warned, gripping my leg. I did not move. Much. The castle was small and wrong. First floor rotted and vine-choked, second floor and up spotless and lit, like someone still lived there and tidied daily. And on a table upstairs, a blood-stained diary with survival rules. Stay in the castle by day. On cloudy days you can look for a way out but rush back when the sun shows. When it rains, lock everything, ignore the noises outside, don't look at the rain. And most underlined of all, once night falls, leave the castle immediately, do not linger. So the castle keeps you safe by day and kills you at night. Cozy. So at nightfall we all camped in the forest instead. And that's where I nearly got everyone killed with footwear. See, my shoes glow. Beautiful glowing Crocs. Great for the seabed, terrible for hiding from a monster. Because at night, the mud monster came. 5 meters of mud and old silt heaving up out of the swamp, and my shoes lit up like a beacon. It turned toward us, and Wu Jinyang ripped my Crocs off my feet and hurled them into the dark forest, and the monster's head followed the light away, and we lived. The monster lumbered to the castle, raised a huge hand, and knocked. Politely. Thump. Thump. Waiting for someone who never answered. Then it turned around and sank back into the swamp. That's why the note said don't stay in the castle at night, because at night, something comes knocking. And here's the part that only happened because I cried. After my shoes got yeeted, I squatted barefoot by the swamp and had a little cry about it. And later, the white forest sprites found my glowing shoes, fought over them like gulls, and dropped one in the swamp. And the mud monster, who was supposed to be gone, rose back up right where my tears had hit the water. It scooped a handful of that water and stared at it, made a long, low sound, half sigh, half question. Then it pulled my lost croc out of its own muddy body, looked over at me sleeping at the forest edge, and quietly sank away. Something down in the mud recognized something in a fish's tears. Hold on to that. It matters more than a shoe. Back at the campfire, I wanted roast bird. Marcus was feeding Bandit from a can, and I stared at it so hard I nearly bored a hole through the tin. So I leaned over to Wu Jinyang and announced, in my most executive voice, "I've decided, let's roast a bird." "Who's going to roast it?" he asked, and I gave him the eyes, the big, shiny, hopeful ones. He held out a long time, then turned away. Dream on. Rude. So I stood up to catch my own bird and marched off, and Wu Jinyang let me go, until Marcus got up to follow me out of worry, and Wu Jinyang snapped, "Stop," and went himself. He found me standing under a tree, staring up at a sleeping bird, waiting. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Waiting for it to fall," I said, completely serious. He sighed the sigh of a man questioning his life, then flicked his hand, and the bird dropped out of the tree by the neck. "It really fell!" I shouted, delighted. Then he told me, "Ice cold, don't wander off again. If you cost me this mission, I will kill you." And I looked at him and tilted my head, not scared even a little, because by now his threats are just weather. I patted his gloomy face with my words instead. "Don't look so grim. We're definitely going to win this time." "Why are you so sure?" he asked. "Because I'm in charge," I said. "We're sure to win." He had no answer for that. And here's a thing I noticed by the fire but didn't fully understand yet. When Lin Xian offered to grill my bird, and I abandoned Wu Jinyang to go praise Lin Xian instead, Wu Jinyang reached out and snatched the bird away mid-handoff. "It's a simple thing," he told Lin Xian coldly. "Plenty of people can do it. No need for you to look after my teammate." And he tossed the bird to Marcus to grill instead. He wouldn't do it himself. He just wouldn't let Lin Xian do it either. I didn't have a word for that then. I do now. There's a lot of pain wrapped up in that boy Lin Xian, by the way. Everyone loves him, the gentle golden heir, and it's never enough, because he spent his whole life losing to Wu Jinyang at everything. His own grandfather sent him off with, "You're inferior to everyone. You can't even hold your own faction. You can't beat him in a trial. The Shen family can't rely on you." So Lin Xian smiles and helps everyone, and quietly carries a whole family telling him he's not good enough. Shu Ruoshi told him, "Don't carry other people's weight, you're not a god." He said, "Good," and kept carrying it anyway. Two heirs, both breaking under fathers and grandfathers, both looking at Wu Jinyang and seeing the thing they'll never be. This whole rich world runs on kids drowning under their own last names. Come dawn, we all rushed back to the castle, because the note said return the moment the sun rises, and the people who didn't listen learned why. Zhou Kai and 3 others dragged their feet, and once the sun burned off the fog, the crowmen could suddenly see, and they took all 4 heads off in seconds. Fog blinds them, sun sharpens them. Wu Jinyang watched from the 2nd floor window, calmly drew the curtain, and filed it away. Fast, he thought, but no threat to me. I noticed the part he missed, though. They ate the eyes, I told him. The crows pecked out their eyes. He went back to the window, and yeah, every severed head had 2 empty black sockets. He didn't know why yet, neither did I, but eyes kept coming up in this place, and eyes are exactly the sort of thing a god who sees the past in one and the future in the other pays attention to. Then came the portraits. A whole wall of them down the grand staircase, old castle owners in fancy clothes, and I pointed at a fat, happy baby in a family photo and said, "Flora was so cute when she was little, like a rice ball." Wu Jinyang turned to me very slowly, because how could I possibly pick Flora out of a crowd of strangers with total certainty? And I pointed at the little label in the corner that said Flora, and he coughed and said, yes, reading the caption. Something even the great Wu Jinyang forgot to do. He pulled down the portraits, and they told a sad little story on their own. A chubby, giggling baby who grew year by year colder and prouder until the last one at age 10, where the girl had no smile at all, chin up, eyes like she owned the world and hated it. Wow, I said, that looks just like you. He turned those exact cold eyes on me. It really does, I added, unafraid. Even the look is the same. He said nothing, because what do you say when a fish tells you a dead, arrogant child has your face? And then the bad news on the back of the frame. Flora Miller, 1986 to 1995. The photos stop at 10 because Flora died at 10. So our mission, fulfill Flora's wish, means granting the wish of a dead girl who can't even know it's granted. Absurd. Su Ruoshi rubbed her temples, wondering what a dead child could possibly want. A gift? Family? To come back to life? And down on the rotting first floor, Wu Jinyang cut away the vines choking a wall and uncovered the answer to the knocking. Words carved in stone. After the moon rises and before the sun climbs, the Wendigo wakes from underground to visit its friend. The mud monster has a name, and it has a friend it knocks for every single night. And that friend is somewhere in this castle full of a dead girl's portraits. Down on the first floor, the mold moved fast. Wu Jinyang put on black gloves to poke around, and white mold bloomed across the fabric while he watched. "Wait," I said, leaning in. "It's growing on your glove." He glanced at me, and I watched him quietly rule me out as the cause, because for once, the creepy, fast-growing life was not my fault. He just torched the whole glove with a ball of fire in his palm, which does not burn him, which I told him was amazing because it is. Then he noticed mold on my clothes too, and without a word of warning, flicked fire at me to burn it off. It worked. It also left a 3-centimeter hole in my shirt with my belly showing through. He looked at it, unbothered, and said, "Let's go upstairs." And I spent the entire walk up mourning my shirt. "It's less attractive now," I muttered, tugging at the hole. "It looks good," he said flatly. "It really doesn't look as good as before," I insisted. "Yes," he said. "Really," I pressed. He said, hands in his pockets, agreeing with whatever got me to stop talking fastest. Shen Haoran took one look at my belly window and opened his mouth to laugh, met Wu Jinyang's glare, and swallowed it. Everyone in the room clocked it. Wu Jinyang burns a hole in the fish's shirt and then threatens to murder anyone who laughs at the fish's shirt. Make it make sense. I couldn't, and I was wearing the shirt. Then the sky went dark, and the wind whipped the reeds white, and Wu Jinyang remembered the 4th rule. When it rains, stay indoors, lock the windows, ignore the noise outside, and whatever you do not look at the rain. "Rain's coming," he said, and hauled me off to a bedroom. He shut the window, drew the curtain, killed the light, and the room went pitch dark. Then he thought better of it and flicked the light back on, and there I was, sitting on the bed, staring right at him with big, shining eyes. He looked away, and the first drops started hitting the glass. Ask me what looks back at you through a window in a castle, where the one rule everyone agrees on is don't look at the rain. Wu Jinyang tossed me a clean white shirt, told me to wear it, told me not to open the window, and left to go handle the rain outside. And the second he was gone, the knocking started. Slow, dull, patient. One heavy tap after another on the glass. Now, the rule was don't open the window. But the knocking would clearly never stop, and I was bored, so I pulled the curtain. And there was the Wendigo, 5 meters of mud and sad white eyes shrinking in the downpour. "Wendigo?" I said, opening the window. "Don't you sleep during the day?" It just made a long, confused sound. Then it opened its huge, muddy hand, and inside was my lost, glowing crock. It found my shoe, in a whole swamp, and carried it back to me in the rain. I was so happy I made it wait, dug an umbrella and a fistful of candy out of my bag, threw the candy into its hand, and handed it my tiny cartoon umbrella, which covered maybe 1% of its enormous head. A 5-meter mud monster hunched under a doll's umbrella, blinking at me. I laughed so hard I nearly fell out the window. "Thank you, go home now, you'll catch cold." And it turned, too small now to reach the glass, and trudged back into the swamp, holding my umbrella over its rolled-up eyes. Whatever the Wendigo is, it is not the monster this castle thinks it is. It knocks every night to visit a friend, and it crossed a flooding swamp to return a fish's shoe. While I was making friends, Wu Jinyang was out in the storm doing science. He threw a psychic blade at the crowmen, and they burst into black mist and reformed. He shot them, burned them with dragon flame, took off his ring and let the scales and golden eyes come out, and torched the whole flock to ash, and they came right back. And that told him everything. Nothing here can be truly killed, because nothing here is real. This whole world, The swamp, the crows, the castle is an illusion, a dream, spun by the fire seed, which has done here exactly what it did with Clara. It latched onto someone's obsession and grew a whole world out of it. And the someone is Flora. The dead 10-year-old whose wish we're supposed to grant is dreaming all of this from beyond the grave, and we're standing inside her head. To get the spark, they'd have to break the dream. And to break the dream, they'd have to answer the one thing the AI kept telling them. What does Flora want? The rain had its own monster, and it went for the people who broke the last rule. Don't look at the rain. Two boys, Wei Jian and Liang Mei, left a curtain open, and a pale girl appeared outside their second-floor window, begging to be let in from the storm, which should have been impossible since the note said windows only exist on the second floor and up. But Wei Jian met her eyes, and her eyes had a whirlpool in them, and he opened the window in a daze. The woman in white crawled in, grabbed his head, and twisted it clean off with a crack, swallowed it whole, then caught Liang Mei at the door and snapped her neck too. Then she went hunting, wearing their voices. She came to my door first, closest. "Jiang Anan, save me!" she rasped, in a stuttering, broken, old phonograph sound. "But the door's locked from the inside," I called back. "I can't open it. Help me, help me!" I glanced at the door, lost interest, and went back to playing with my shoe. "Sorry, if your voice sounds like a rusty violin and you're begging through a locked door in a murder castle, I'm not your girl." So she moved to Chen Haoran, using Liang Mei's voice. And Chen Haoran, sweet, dumb, loyal Chen Haoran, actually got up to open it, because his friend was outside in the rain. He had his hand on the knob when green, bloody water seeped under the door, and he froze. And the handle started turning on its own. He screamed. Lin Xian and Su Ruoxi burst out of their room. But Wu Jinyang got there first, and he had the woman in white dangling off the floor by her throat, that rusty violin shriek pouring out of her. He frowned like she was giving him a headache, squeezed, and her neck snapped in his fingers. Then he dropped her, took a handkerchief from Marcus, and wiped his hand. And Lin Xian asked the obvious, "Why didn't you just use psychic power?" And Wu Jinyang looked at him like he was slow. "Didn't you notice? Lin Xian tried his power on the body, and nothing happened, because you can't grip a soul that isn't there, and then the corpse dissolved into nothing. Fake." "Not just the woman," Wu Jinyang said, smiling. "Maybe the whole world we're standing in. This is Flora's dream. She's dead, but her consciousness never left, and we're all trapped inside it." And on his way out, he clocked the white mold spreading up Su Ruoxi's sleeve, and instead of burning it off like he had mine, he smiled, interested, and walked away. Which, in hindsight, was the coldest thing he did all day. Then Wu Jinyang locked me in a room to keep me out of trouble, and Marcus cooked me braised pork rib rice, which was incredible, and also handed me Bandit's canned dog food to deliver to Bandit, which I swore, on my honor, I would not eat. Reader, I ate it. I found Bandit on the terrace, and we did our thing, where I fed him my rice by the handful and he fed me nothing because dogs can't share, so I ate his dog food myself, and it was delicious. Wu Jinyang walked out and found me with dog food crumbs around my mouth, an empty can, and a very content Doberman. There was a long silence, and then, against his own will, he asked, "Is it tasty?" "Delicious," I confirmed. He pressed his temples and told me humans don't eat dog food. "Why?" I asked. "Because they just don't." So I thought about it hard, clapped, and announced my solution. "Then I don't want to be human anymore. I want to be a dog. That way I could eat human food and dog food." And he crushed it flat. Even dogs can't eat human food. I have never been so disappointed. There's no winning move. The whole system is rigged against a fish who just wants to eat everything. Meanwhile, the grown-ups pieced Flora together. Flora Miller, orphaned at 4 or 5 when her parents died, left alone in a huge castle with servants and relatives who visited to teach her how to be a proper heiress. And then, at 10, she drowned. In the swamp. Ruled an accident by the family. So this whole nightmare world is the dream of a rich little girl who was raised by paid strangers and died in the water at 10, and whose spirit built a castle out of her own memories and started luring people in to die. And the question hanging over all of it, the one Lin Xian kept circling, is whether a healthy 10-year-old really just fell in a swamp by accident, or whether somebody helped her. And in the middle of all that, Lin Xian finally asked Wu Jinyang the thing he'd wondered since day one. "Why are you so hostile to me? I've only ever been polite to you." And Wu Jinyang gave him the honest answer, which was almost a relief. "You've misunderstood. I'm not targeting just you. I'm targeting all of you. Hypocritical, foolish weaklings. and he walked off. He doesn't hate Lin Zian, he hates everyone equally, which, if you're Lin Zian, killing yourself for years to be worthy is somehow so much worse. Remember that white mold Wu Jinyang didn't burn off Shu Ruoxi? It was busy. It sank tendrils into her skin, threaded into her blood, and crawled toward her head. And Shu Ruoxi felt nothing but a passing dizziness she blamed on a bad night's sleep. Then she lay down to rest, and the mold gave her a dream that wasn't hers. In the dream, she was small, shrunk down, sitting in the castle garden while people in black came and went. Someone led her to a church, where 2 coffins lay banked in white flowers. A funeral. Her parents' funeral. And an owl watched her from the cross with brown eyes, and the black-clad figures pulled their faces into twisted smiles and called, "Come back, come back!" And her chest ached and her stomach turned and she ran. Out of the church, under a sky full of circling crows, down the winding path toward the swamp, her body getting heavier with every step. The owl landed on her head and pecked at her hair, and she kept swatting it, and she didn't see the path end. She fell. The swamp closed over her, dark and cold, and as she sank, the owl darted in and snatched the gemstone necklace off her throat. Shu Ruoxi woke drenched in sweat, and Lin Zian, holding her hand, connected it to the records. Flora's parents died when she was around 5, so the small child at the coffins was Flora. Flora drowned in the swamp at 10, so the fall into the dark water was Flora's death. Shu Ruoxi hadn't dreamed a nightmare. She'd been fed Flora's memory of dying, straight through her own eyes. The mold isn't a disease, it's a projector, and it's loading a dead girl's last day into a living girl's head. And nobody in that room said the quiet part, but I will. The owl. The one that chased her to the water. The one that stole her necklace off her drowning throat. A healthy 10-year-old heiress does not simply trip into a swamp. Somebody built that owl into her death. And Shu Ruoxi, wearing the mold, is about to find out exactly who, whether she wants to or not. Night fell, and we all filed out of the castle again, because the castle kills you after dark. Wu Jinyang had woken me up ages ago, and I'd finally got my energy back, which I used entirely to lobby him about dinner. "I want the braised pork rib rice again tonight," I whispered in his ear, but more rice this time, it wasn't enough, and more meat. He peeled my hand off his sleeve and glanced at Shu Ruoxi coming down the stairs, pale and quiet, and something clicked behind his eyes, because Marcus had just told him about the mold and the dream. Interesting, he thought. He said, "Let's go," and walked toward the forest. I followed, mourning loudly. "I only ate 1 meal today, I'm starving. If I starve to death, you lose your teammate, and no teammate means no mission." I patted my very not empty stomach for emphasis. Wu Jinyang glanced at my increasingly round little face and visibly wondered if the definition of starving had changed. "You carry a bag that size and you really have no food?" he asked, tired. And I went dead quiet. My eyes started doing laps, left, right, anywhere but his face, because the bag was of course full of snacks I'd been hoarding and I did not want to share. My guilty conscience was, and I quote him, all too obvious. He reached over and grabbed my backpack, and I lunged for it with both hands, because a fish will let you insult her, threaten her, lock her in rooms, and burn her shirt, but you do not touch the snack bag. Ask me what a boy who's been told his whole life that everyone is garbage does when he finally opens the one bag in the world that a girl guards like treasure. The mold went deeper into Shu Ruoxi, and the dreams got worse. This time, she was Flora's rotting head in the swamp, mold blinding her, a crow ripping her eyes out, flies feasting, and then a giant white trout swimming up and swallowing her whole. And she realized the horror underneath it. She'd assumed all along her body was down in the swamp, but she only had a head, just a head in the mud. She woke retching, the smell of rot still in her nose. Lin Zian begged her to let him force cleanse the infection out. She refused. "These dreams show me the truth of how Flora died," she said, pale and shaking. "I want to win, and this is mine to do." She'd decided to let a dead girl's murder crawl through her own veins if that's what it took. That's the difference between her and the villain. He'd burn a village to win. She'd bleed for it. Meanwhile, I got bored being locked upstairs and spotted Wu Jinyang heading out. He told me, in his lying voice, that he was just going downstairs to look around. "Go dry your hair." So of course I went to the window, and he felt someone watching and turned, and there I was, glaring through the glass. He came over, pinched his temples, and I informed him he'd gone the wrong way, and that I wanted to come too, because I was on a mission also. "Fine," he sighed. "Come down." So I climbed up onto the window ledge, gathered the little white sprites clinging to my feet, and jumped. Straight out the second floor. A fish and a comet tail of shrieking, laughing sprites falling out of the sky. His pupils blew wide, and he threw up a psychic net that caught us and bounced us like a trampoline. He fished me out by the collar. "Are you insane?" he demanded. "How do you jump out a second-floor window?" "You told me to come down," I said, genuinely confused. He'd said, "Come down." He had not said, "Don't launch yourself into the void." He shut his eyes and jammed his thumb into that ring and rebuilt his whole face, which is what he does instead of screaming, and walked toward the swamp with a fish and a chorus of sprites at his heels, all of us repeating everything he said. "What are you going to do?" I asked. "What are you going to do?" the sprites echoed. "You're walking too fast. You're walking too fast." His ears, I'm told, were on the verge of bleeding. Out in the swamp, Wu Jinyang did his grim science on the crows. He snapped one's neck, pried its beak open, and inside was a rotting eye with a blue iris. Flora's eye. When the crow was fake, it rotted and vanished, but in the sunlight, in his fire, the eye held its shape. So the crows carry Flora's eyes in their mouths. I helped by shoving my face into his elbow to see better, until he propped my head on his arm and read the beak over the top of my hair. I called the sunrise before it came. Wu Jinyang said the fog thinning didn't mean the sun would show, and I pointed behind him at the dark clouds splitting open around a coin of light. "Told you so," I said. "Chin up." He rubbed his forehead and said, which is villain for, "You were right, and I hate it." Then the sun burned the fog off, the crows got their sight back and came for us, and he threw up a wall of fire between us and them, torched the flock, and pulled a clean, unrotted eye from one to study. And the crows that didn't burn turned to white stone statues in the light and crumbled to dust. Everything in this world is a piece of something. Then Lin Zian and Su Roshi showed up, drawn by the fire, and caught Wu Jinyang holding an eyeball. "You've been spying on us," Lin Zian snapped. "So what?" Wu Jinyang said. "No shame at all. Whoever wins gets to talk. You could do the same if you had the ability." And I stood there nodding along because that logic sounded reasonable to a fish, which Wu Jinyang caught out of the corner of his eye. And his face froze, and his hand clenched, because for some reason he did not want me nodding along to that. He backpedaled fast, muttered, "There's no rule against eavesdropping in the academy," and hauled me off by the collar while I waved bye-bye. Su Roshi squinted after him, because last time he'd declared, "I am the rule," and now he was hiding behind the rulebook. Only for me. He kept editing himself, only for me, and hadn't noticed he was doing it. Left alone, Lin Zian put the pieces together. The crows hold her eyes. Her head's in the swamp with the trout. Something else took her bones and the mold's eating her body. Flora's wish, he realized, is to be made whole again, to collect all the scattered pieces of herself. A little girl blown apart and scattered across a nightmare, waiting for someone to gather her back together. At the campfire, I sang the one line of song my mom ever taught me, over and over. "Let's go on an adventure!" And the sprites bounced and sang it with me. Lin Zian asked why I only knew one line. "Because that's all Mom taught me," I said. And he smiled and said I must love my mother. I mention her constantly. "Of course," I said. "Mom is the best human in the whole world." And everyone got quiet and sad, because I'm the orphan here, and they thought I was grieving. But I wasn't. And when Marcus blundered in asking how I remembered so much of my mother if I was little back then, and Wu Jinyang shot him a glare that could freeze the sun, I answered it happily anyway. I wasn't little. I was already over 80 years old back then. Thousands if you count the sleeping. Longer than my father lived, my poor father who died young. They all thought I was joking, or so broken with grief I was talking nonsense, and Marcus punched himself and promised to buy me any food I wanted forever to make up for the question. So I explained, because they didn't get it. I'm not sad. Everything born must die, sea and land alike. There's no escaping it. Death is what gives life meaning. Hunting, traveling, having children, all of it exists because of death. Without death, there's no newborn. My mom said death is the closing ceremony of the feast of life, and every feast ends. She reached her end happy, so I'm not sad. And my dad gets to be with the one he loves forever, so what's there to grieve? And Wu Jinyang, who'd been quiet, looked at me and asked, low, "But they left you all alone in the world. Aren't you sad about that?" And I went quiet for a second and told him the truth. Their lives belonged to them. They weren't living for me. He stared at me a long time after that, because it's true and it's strange, because I talk about life like I'm watching it from the outside instead of living inside it, which, I am. And Marcus, watching Wu Jinyang sit alone across the fire, thought something sad. Maybe the real orphan here isn't the cheerful fish. It's the boy who lost his mother the day he was born and got dumped in Zone E to raise himself. Because that's where they found Wu Jinyang, a small child in the worst slum on the continent, already strong enough to level a city, already able to watch people die without a flicker. The Liu family keeps where he came from a buried secret. And I looked at him across the flames, this dying boy who thinks everyone is garbage because the first people to treat him like garbage were his own family, and I understood, for the first time, that my mission wasn't to trick a monster. It was to reach a kid nobody ever came back for. That night, there was no moon. And no moon meant the Wendigo didn't come knocking politely. It went berserk. The ground heaved like something underneath was thrashing, and the sprites on my shoulders shrieked, "The moon's gone! Wendigo's going crazy again! It eats so many people, the blood's disgusting!" Suruakshi dropped into a sleep so deep the earthquake couldn't wake her, blood leaking from her mouth. And I put my ear to the ground and listened, and looked up at Wu Jinyang and said, "Honestly, it's very uncomfortable down there." He asked me what we should do. "Run," I said. So we ran. Chen Haoran grabbed the unconscious Suruashi and bolted into the forest, because the note never said not to go to the forest, and the castle terrified him. Nobody told him the note never mentioned the forest, because the man who wrote it died in the forest, and dead men don't finish their notes. Because the forest has a horned owl that pulls the bones right out of your body. It had already killed Wu Jinyang's whole scouting team that way. "Castle or forest?" Wu Jinyang asked me. "Forest," I said instantly. He nodded and led Blue Dragon in, and behind us the Wendigo tore out of the swamp with its rolled white eyes gone blood red and charged the empty castle, howling. And in the forest the sprites finally spilled everything, because they can't keep a secret to save their tiny lives. "We used to live inside Wendigo's mouth," they chirped. "Wendigo only goes crazy when there's no moon, and no matter what they do, they can't turn it back. And it went bad after it ate a person." "A tall, short-haired man," one of them said, pointing at Wu Jinyang, a human like him. And here's the part that reframed the whole monster. The Wendigo wasn't always a monster. It became one after it ate that man. And before all of it, Wendigo was Flora's good friend. It loved her. And one day, Flora just disappeared, and the Wendigo has been waiting for her here ever since, knocking on her castle every night the moon comes up, waiting for a little girl who is never, ever coming back. The scariest thing in this swamp is a grief-mad creature holding a door open for a dead child. Chen Haoran, meanwhile, was having the worst night of his life alone in the dark with unconscious Shu Ruoshi, whose head he'd accidentally bonked into a tree hard enough to bloody her mouth. A strange bird cry closed in. Something landed on his shoulder, and he squeezed his eyes shut and screamed, "Get away!" And the thing on his shoulder was the horned owl, one flap from pulling every bone out of his body. And then Lin Xian's voice cut in, and the owl flew off, and Chen Haoran burst into tears of relief and immediately yelled at Lin Xian for scaring him. Here's how Lin Xian found him in a black, endless forest with no light. A little white sprite led him. It picked every path at random, and every random path went straight to Chen Haoran, dodging every root and pothole and snake on the way, like being handed a fistful of pure luck. The horned owl took one look at the sprite on Lin Xian's shoulder and fled. Because that's what the sprites do. They heal and they bless, and monsters that should eat you suddenly can't be bothered. Chen Haoran, ungrateful, called the sprite a useless little dumpling that couldn't fight a monster. "It's not coming back," the sprite said smugly. "Why?" asked Chen Haoran. "Because I'm here," said the dumpling. "I'll protect you." And it did. These little glowing, bouncy things that fell out of a monster's mouth are, it turns out, the kindest thing in the whole nightmare. Hold that. It matters. Deep in the forest, Wu Jinyang's group found the last body. A skeleton mostly turned to ash and soil, old rags, a rusted pocket watch stopped forever in his hand bones, moss and little flowers growing up out of him, new life feeding on the dead. His bones were whole, so the horned owl hadn't gotten him. Something else killed this one. And beside him was a notebook, and the notebook held the truth. He'd been the last survivor of an earlier group. His diary said the Wendigo went berserk one moonless night and swallowed most of them. The rest fled into the forest and starved in the dark. The horned owl took the ones who lingered, and when he was dying, the white sprites came out of the trees and healed his wounds and danced around him like angels showing mercy. And in their warm light, he remembered things. Flora, the castle, a newspaper from 1995, and here it is, the real death of Flora Miller. The paper reported that Flora of the famous Addams family had been dismembered, her body disposed of in a way too gruesome to print. Then the story got killed. every copy recalled. And the family issued a new version. Little Flora accidentally drowned in the swamp. But the truth leaked out anyway, and it spread through the countryside as a nursery rhyme, the kind children sing without knowing what it means. And it went like this. The uncle cut off Flora's head and threw it in the swamp. The uncle cut off her limbs and threw them in the hole in the ground. The uncle cut off her torso and buried it in the courtyard. Poor Flora, poor Flora. A crow pecked out her eyes, and mold ate away her body. Poor Flora, poor Flora. The horned owl carried off her bones, and the trout swallowed her head. Poor Flora, poor Flora. The uncle, the Adams relatives who took such good care of her, who visited every year to teach the orphan heiress how to manage the fortune that would all be theirs if only she were gone. They didn't lose her to a swamp. They took her apart. Head to the swamp, limbs to a pit, torso in the garden, and scattered her so she could never be whole and never be found. And every monster in this nightmare, the crows with her eyes, the horned owl with her bones, the mold on her flesh, the trout that ate her head, the wendigo that loved her and went mad waiting, all of it is Flora. Blown into pieces by the people who were supposed to love her, dreaming herself back together from the bottom of a swamp. And the last thing the dying man wrote broke my heart a little. If I'd known I'd be staying here forever, I never would have argued with her on the day I left. He knew her. Whoever he was, he knew Flora, and his last regret wasn't dying. It was a fight he never got to take back. And Wu Jinyang finally caught the thread he'd been missing all along. The little sprites used to live in the wendigo's mouth. They are its teeth. And the teeth heal, and dance, and hand out luck. Which is exactly what Blessing did back in Endless Township, that warm, protecting light. He'd seen Blessing a dozen times and never recognized its true shape until now, sitting in a monster's teeth. And Blessing is Kairos's power. But here's what stopped him cold. The old god records say a nature god's power dies with the god and gets rebuilt fresh. Divine power isn't supposed to linger out in the world. So why is Kairos's blessing scattered across all these little worlds? Unless Kairos didn't die. And newborn, the power of life, keeps showing up wherever a certain fish walks. And the sprites adore her. Does Jiang Anan, he wondered, know that's blessing clinging to her? He was one honest inch from the answer. Then I slapped a mosquito, held the corpse up to my face, and muttered what the heck at it, and he decided he was overthinking, and let it go. Saved by a bug. Then I did something that mattered. I touched Shuruoshi's forehead while she thrashed in the mold fever, and my sprites touched it too, and her nightmare went quiet. And in that quiet, she got the true memory. Little Flora, cold-faced and lonely, refusing to see her uncle, a man they called Mr. Thorn, who wore an owl brooch at his throat. Flora running from her maids to the swamp, where she met a lump of mud with rolled-back eyes, and instead of screaming, she got curious and picked up a stray white tooth off the bridge and watched the mud monster's eyes follow it, and laughed and tossed it onto its head and made a friend. That's how the Wendigo and the thrown-away heiress found each other, two lonely things at the edge of a swamp. And then the uncle's car pulled up, and the man with the owl. Brooch stepped out smiling, Flora. And Shuruoshi snapped awake, because that's the man from the nursery rhyme. The uncle, the one who took her apart. But the mold had done more than feed Shuruoshi memories. It had let Flora in. Shuruoshi woke up wearing Flora's cold little smile, and she wasn't Shuruoshi anymore. Flora and Shuruoshi's body called Chen Haoran an idiot, snapped two of Wu Jinyang's guards' necks like they were nothing, and walked to my room to kill me, because she'd noticed the monsters obeyed me the way they never obeyed anyone else. She found me asleep with sprites snoring on my chest, one blowing a snot bubble. Vines came up through the window and grabbed her hand before it reached me, and I opened my eyes, looked at the ceiling, and said her name. Flora. And she laughed, but it came out a little girl's shriek, and her borrowed skin cracked gray, and she said she knew I was different. That's why they followed me. Since you're interesting, I won't kill you quickly. And I sat up and told her simply, you can't kill me. She lunged, the vines yanked her back inches from my face, and I looked at her with the calm, deep-water eyes, and I asked her, kindly, when are you going to leave Aji's body? She refused. So I told her, all right, if you won't come out, I'll take you out. It might hurt a little, bear with it. And I put my hand to the side of Shuruokshi's head and pulled. The mold tore out of Shuruokshi's skin and wrapped my knuckles, Flora's whole consciousness dragging free, and Flora screamed a pain she hadn't felt since she died, a pain from the soul, her skin splitting, black rot leaking, bone showing through. Then wind and gray fog swallowed the room, and when it cleared, the mold slid back into Shu Ruoxi. Flora's face healed, and she knelt on the floor staring up at me with real fear in her gray eyes. "What are you?" I didn't answer. I just told her gently, "So you should come out on your own. Aji hurts too." Shu Ruoxi woke up free, in my bed, herself again, and immediately scolded me, because that's love in her language. "Jiang Anan, how do you fall in the street and lose a tooth, and then eat barbecue with a gap in your mouth? Who do you think you are, Iron?" She'd noticed my missing teeth, which I'd lost eating all the hard, delicious things, and she stuffed soft bread into my hands and told me to stop eating rocks during the mission. I beamed at her, and she had no idea she'd spent the last day as a murderer wearing her own face. Not yet. Wu Jinyang pieced it together, that Flora had left Shu Ruoxi and come to me, and he interrogated me about it. I reported proudly, chin up, like a kid with a gold star. "Flora was inside Ashi, and I made her leave!" "How?" he asked, not buying it for a second. "I promised to grant her wish," I said, "and she left." He went quiet because it really was that simple, and that annoyed him. And then I did the thing that surprised him most. I learned to bargain. Because when he asked what Flora's wish was, I closed my mouth, sat back, let my eyes drift around all guilty, and told him I'd only tell him if he traded me something. Braised pork rib rice. He stared at me like I'd grown a second head. "When did you learn to negotiate?" he asked. "Flora taught me, actually. She wouldn't take my help for free, insisted everything be a fair swap, told me all humans are like that, so I tried it." And Wu Jinyang, tired, said, "Fine, and I whispered the wish in his ear. He thought I was becoming very promising. I think he was proud, in his awful way. He also stopped me from telling Ashi and Lin Zian how I'd freed Shu Ruoxi. "Do you think everyone will just believe whatever you say?" he asked. "I can accept your nonsense because I choose to. They won't." And I pouted and lowered my head like I was thinking about it, and then muttered, "But what if they do believe me? Mom always said don't decide how something ends before you've tried it." He took a long breath. Because that's the thing he couldn't stand about me. I keep saying reasonable things in the wrongest possible voice, and being right anyway. And when Shu Ruoxi realized what she'd done, that Flora had worn her body and killed Wu Jinyang's men and nearly killed me, she went white and sick and apologized over and over, doubled over with stomach pain. "It's my fault," she said, and I told her, "But I'm fine." And when Wu Jinyang pulled me away, I reached into my pocket, set a sleepy little sprite on the ground, and pointed it at her. It blinked, climbed her leg, plopped onto her arm, and her stomach stopped hurting. "Mind your own business," Wu Jinyang said. "No," I said. "She's good to me. She gave me shoes and bread. Mom said you thank people who are kind to you." He said nothing. He just filed it away with everything else he was quietly collecting about a fish who pays back kindness in glowing teeth. Now the body parts. Lin Xian's people dug the courtyard for Flora's torso, and I went to the swamp to handle the head, because the head was inside the trout, and the trout was the woman in white who'd ripped off Wei Jian's head in the rain, a fish that wears a person. I sat on the bridge eating my braised pork rib rice, using a spoon this time because Wu Jinyang had specifically told me not to eat with my hands, and I dangled my feet in the water as bait. Flora surfaced first, in ripples, disgusted by the smell of my food, refusing to visit the Wendigo she kept calling a stupid idiot, even though she clearly still loved it. Then the trout came. It rose up as a snow-white woman, gorgeous, gentle-eyed, hungry. "What are you eating?" she asked, staring at my head. "I'm so hungry, can I eat it?" "No," I said, "I only have this much." "It's okay," she smiled. "I'll eat something else." "That won't work either," I said. "I only have one head, and humans die without their heads." She froze, because I'd seen straight through her, and then her face split into fangs, and her arm bones stretched, and she lunged. And I got a little tired of it. I pressed my hand to her monstrous face and said, "Honestly, don't do this, it doesn't look good." Pushed her back into the water, picked up my plate. "Bye-bye." And when she leapt out to bite me anyway, the world changed. The swamp became the deep, black, freezing bottom of the ocean. Icy blue water crashed in and swallowed everything. And above me, filling the dark, hung an enormous, monstrous fish with glowing eyes, staring down at the little trout like it was a mayfly. Kairos, my real face. And the swamp girl felt a terror older than her bones, a fear written into every living thing that has ever swum in a sea a god rules, and she was crushed flat, her body folding and cracking under a weight like the whole ocean, until she lay pressed against the bridge, just a stranded white fish again. I turned around, saw only the trout lying there, scratched my head, and walked back to the castle. And on the way I mentioned to Marcus, oh, a really big fish jumped out and got stranded over there. He lit up, ran over, emptied his gun into it for good measure, sliced it open, and dug a child's skull out of the rot. Flora's head. The trout crumbled to dust. And Marcus walked away thinking he'd just been having incredible luck lately. He had. The luck was a god in a torn shirt, standing right next to him, being extremely casual about the fact that she'd just flattened a monster with a look. So now we had her eyes from the crows, her head from the trout, her torso coming up out of the courtyard. All that was left was her limbs, and the limbs were with the horned owl, deep in the forest, the thing that pulls the bones clean out of a body. Wu Jinyang packed my bag, told me we were going to the forest, and off we went. And I foraged the entire way, because a forest is basically a buffet. Red berries, straight into my mouth before Wu Jinyang could turn around, then a fistful more into my bag. I even robbed a squirrel, plucked the berries right out of its little hands and set it back down to stare after me in betrayal. White flowers off the vines, a frog into the bag. Red mushrooms into the bag, and when the bag got full, I folded my shirt into a pouch and kept going. Wu Jinyang walked ahead, pretending very hard that he was not escorting a god who steals from squirrels. This is the thing about me. The whole nightmare could be resolving, a murdered child could be waiting to be made whole, and I will still stop to fit one more mushroom into my shirt. Ask me what a little girl who got chopped into 6 pieces by her own uncle actually wishes for, when a god finally offers to put her back together. The whole sad story finally came together, most of it lived through Flora's own memories. After Flora's parents died, she was a cold, lonely little heiress, until she met the Wendigo at the swamp and made it her friend. And the Wendigo loved her, the simple, total way a lonely thing loves the one being that's kind to it. It brought her a flower every single day. When she lied and told it to keep bringing flowers, it went quiet. Because one day the swamp flowers would all die, and it couldn't keep a promise it couldn't keep. So it started walking to the forest to find flowers that bloomed in other seasons, so it would never run out, so it would never fail her. Every season, any flower, for years, and a cold, withdrawn orphan got a warm spring in the middle of her winter. Then the uncle found out. Thorn, the man with the owl brooch who controlled her food, her money, her whole inheritance, and who'd been hunting for something in that castle for years. 2 red gemstones her dying parents had begged her to keep from everyone and destroy, calling them evil stones that bewitch people. Fire seeds, embers of the dark star. Thorn wanted them, and when Flora wouldn't hand them over, he found the one lever that worked. He killed the Wendigo, scooped up its mud, took its teeth, and told a sobbing 10-year-old that if she ever wanted her only friend back, she'd give him the gem. So she traded. Half a gem for the teeth. Except when Thorn opened the box, the teeth were gone. Because I'd quietly lifted them, and the gem he got was only half. He'd killed her friend for half a stone. And Flora bit his wrist and screamed and clawed at him and got flung across the room, just a child who'd lost the only thing she loved, and the Wendigo never woke up again. That's the world these rich families build. A little girl, a mud monster, and one man who looked at pure love and saw only leverage. And then Thorn killed her. On an ordinary day, in an extraordinary way. He couldn't find the other half of the gem, so he cut the answer out of a 10-year-old. Dismembered her. Head to the swamp, limbs to a pit, torso to the garden, scattered so she'd never be whole. Her body rotted underground while the crows took her eyes, and a fish took her head, and an owl took her bones. But Flora didn't die all the way. The last half of the gem was pinned to her button, and it kept her soul awake down there in the dark. And she felt all of it. Felt the maggots, felt the mold spread over her flesh, felt herself rot in the cold. And she stayed anyway. Because the Wendigo hadn't come back yet, and she wasn't going to leave without saying goodbye. Then the sprites woke and gathered themselves back into the Wendigo, and it came looking for her, spring flowers in its hands, no idea she was dead. It knocked on the castle door all night. She didn't open it, so it left the flower on her windowsill and went home, remembering she'd told it not to come by day. And the next night it walked to the far end of the swamp and picked her irises and came back, and yesterday's flower was still on the sill, so it added a new one, and knocked and waited till dawn. And it did that. Every night. For seasons. For years. The withered flowers piled up on the windowsill until there was no room, and it would clear the dead stems and lay fresh ones on top, and knock on a door that was never, ever going to open, for a little girl who was already scattered in 6 places. That's the saddest thing in this whole story, and I'm not going to make a joke about it. A monster the whole swamp feared, keeping a promise to a dead child, one flower at a time, forever. And then Thorn came back, years later, remade into a genetic mutant because the half-gem had given him psychic power. He came for the other half. And the Wendigo smelled the gem on his neck, remembered whose death it belonged to, and ate him whole. Swallowed the man and the gem together. And the gem, burning inside it, drove it mad. That's the berserk, moonless night monster that ate everyone who wandered into this nightmare. Not a beast. A grieving friend with a murderer and an evil stone rotting in its belly, going insane one flower short of goodbye. So that was Flora's wish, the whole time. Not to come back to life, not revenge even. Just get Thorn out of the Wendigo, so her friend could stop being a monster and finally be free, so they could both leave. That's it. A little girl chopped into 6 pieces, and all she wanted was to set her friend down gently. So we did it. Wu Jinyang called the rain and the Wendigo's mud washed away in it, layer by layer, until Thorn's skeleton showed through, fused into its body, the gem burning dark red in the eye socket. And I set my sprites, my 9 little teeth, back where they belonged, into the Wendigo's gums, and its blessing flared, and it held still and trusting while we pulled a dead man's bones out of it, hand over hand, me and Wu Jinyang and Su Ruokshi all pulling together. And when the last bone came free, the Wendigo let out a long, long breath, like something it had carried for years finally set down. And the dream shattered. The beautiful green swamp, the castle, the forest, all of it peeled away, because the fire had been holding the pretty illusion up over a dead wasteland the whole time. Life paid for with life, same as Endless Township. The real castle underneath was a ruin, bones under a beautiful shell. And then the best and saddest thing. The Wendigo, free at last, ran. Faster than it ever had, mud drying and falling off, shrinking as it went, back down to child size, all the way to the one broken wall still standing. And in the empty window, a little girl leaned out, blue eyes bright, and waved, and the Wendigo's dim eyes finally lit up, and it scrambled up the wall smaller and smaller, until Flora caught it in her arms and spun it around and laughed and said, "You found me! You found me!" And the sunlight came through the window, and Flora went soft and clear like a bubble, and the two of them held hands and dissolved into the warm light together, and were gone, without a trace, like a breeze passing through. Wish granted. A murdered child and the monster who loved her, finally allowed to leave. I've read 1,000 fairy tales. This is the only one that ever made me cry. But Thorn didn't get to just vanish. His bones, with the last half-ember still burning in them, pulled themselves together and bolted into the forest to escape. And Wu Jinyang, who wanted that ember, sent Blue Dragon to hunt it, and slipped and said the word fire right in front of me, and Marcus flinched, because you're not supposed to say fire in front of the girl who keeps figuring things out. He didn't need to send anyone. I handled it. Thorn's fleeing skeleton hit the edge of the forest where the road cracked open, and out of the fog and the churning storm-blue clouds, something rose, something tens of meters tall. Rain fell and washed the mist away, and Thorn saw a little girl standing in the middle of the broken road, and behind her, filling the whole sky, a giant fish with a lamp-bright eye. "Who are you?" he screamed, as the rain drowned his flames. And I looked up, slow, and I didn't feel like a fish that eats butterflies right then. I felt like what I am. And the giant fish behind me tilted its head exactly when I tilted mine, a mirror the size of the horizon. And when I finally spoke, the giant fish spoke with me, my little girl voice and its deep 10,000-year-old voice ringing out together like 2 bells. I'll help her fulfill her last wish. Then I ran at him, and the fish swam with me, and I passed him, and it opened its mouth and swallowed Thorn whole. When I stopped, back to back with his falling bones, the fire in him had gone to almost nothing. I walked away without looking back. Wu Jinyang came out of the forest to find a scattered skeleton, a dying ember that no longer even drank his power, and a single raindrop he couldn't explain. He pocketed the near-dead fire and went home, one more mystery for the vault. And I went to Flora's empty room, where my sprites were waiting, and I ate them one by one, crunching the little teeth back into my own gums until my mouth was full again, and I laid a bouquet of flowers on the dirt where Flora used to be, and blessed it, white light falling from my hand into the soil. Because even a god who steals from squirrels knows that some things deserve flowers. Then the trial ended, and we woke up in the pods, and Wu Jinyang was acting strange, because he'd figured out too much and felt something he had no file for. So he was avoiding me, which, good luck. I found his pod, banged on it, Wu Jinyang, Wu Jinyang! And he opened it, and I flopped over the edge to grin at him, and he just looked at me with that little ripple in his usually flat eyes and asked, "What?" "Nothing," I said. "Let's go together." And I grabbed his hand and hauled him out, my braids whipping him across the face, and dragged him through the halls. The whole academy stopped to stare, because there is apparently no one alive who touches Wu Jinyang and keeps their hand. Students peeked at the girl pulling the most dangerous person on the continent around by the sleeve like a wagon. And I, oblivious, waved at all of them. "Hello, hello!" beaming. Random boys who'd been secretly staring got greeted by nameless cheer and had to look away and mumble hello back while Wu Jinyang's cold eyes swept over them and made them shrink. And then he did a thing he kept doing and hating. He caught my wrist to slow me down, said slower in that low boy's voice, and then looked at my wrist in his hand, all soft and round like a rice ball, and the air went scorching, and his usually casual hand felt unusually hot, and he yanked it back like he'd been burned and walked ahead fast. A boy who's been told his whole life that everyone is filthy garbage, whose own father priced him as fuel, cannot for the life of him work out why one muddy fish's wrist makes his hands feel like they're on fire. He'd seen the wedding vision. He'd seen the god. He knew, somewhere under all the ice, exactly what was happening. And it terrified him more than anything in either nightmare, because it was the one thing he'd decided long ago he would never, ever be allowed to have. Suruoshi was waiting at the door, and she took one look at me trailing Wu Jinyang and made a face, then took the enormous, heavy bag off my shoulder, slung it on her own, and fixed my collar. "Thank you, Ashi." And Wu Jinyang glanced at my bag riding on her shoulder, and something crossed his face I couldn't read, and he left. When I asked Suruoshi why he'd barely spoken to me for days, why he kept dodging me, she told me to stay away from him, because he's a very strange person. She's not wrong, she's just also not right. Because something bad was breaking loose out in the real world. Lin Zian had already rushed back to White Dove headquarters. Blue Dragon and White Dove were both mobilizing, which is never good news, and the trouble was in Zone E, the slum, my so-called home. Shuruoshi was going back because her parents are there, and I said I wanted to come, and she agreed, and then I asked the important question, which was whether the food at her house is good. She stared at me for a while and said, "Speechless, delicious, good enough." But before we went, she warned me, and the warning is where this whole story stops being a game. The Blue Dragon out in Zone E aren't bored rich students playing at cruelty. They're the real thing. True fanatics running the Gene Cleansing Project, a plan to wipe every non-psychic off the continent, and they will genuinely kill you. And that project has a father. The Liu family proposed it, and one person dragged it to its bloody peak. Personally, an extreme misanthropist who decided a whole class of people should consistently cease to exist. Wu Jinyang. The boy whose wrist panic I just watched. The dying boy his own father priced as ash. The architect of the machine built to erase people exactly like the body I'm wearing. Suruoshi couldn't understand why anyone would exterminate a whole group of harmless people over nothing. What threat, she said, could a powerless nobody possibly pose to the mainland, or to him? And I lowered my head, and I thought about a dark red ember that eats psychic power, and a dark star that needs to drink every psychic dry to be reborn. And I thought about who, exactly, in a world of psychics, would be the one kind of person a rising dark star couldn't feed on. And I muttered, too quiet for her to hear, "That's not necessarily true." So here's where we are. I'm a dead fish god wearing an orphan's body, sent to make the coldest boy alive fall in love with me or be deleted forever. And 194 souls tried before me, and every one of them died. He's a dying misanthrope building a genocide, sitting on an ember that will kill every psychic, including himself, the day his father finishes the dark star. And his hands catch fire when they touch my wrist. We're about to walk together into a slum where his own people murder mine for sport, and somewhere under Zone E is the answer to why a genocidal prince can't stop looking at a girl who eats butterflies. Ask me what happens when the boy who decided love would kill him finally follows the one person in any world who was never, not once, afraid of him, straight into the place his own hands built to burn people like her.